Chapter 1125. After playing all night, Yang was in a good state of mind. As usual, he did not yawn or feel sleepy. Unlike Murphy, she was really sleepy. She took her clothes and was ready to take a bath, but her eyelids couldn't stand it. She just sat on the sofa for a while, and then dozed off. When Yang came back from his father-in-law's place, he saw that Murphy had already curled up on the sofa and fallen asleep. Go to bed and sleep. Yang chuckled, shook his head, and walked over. He put one hand through Murphy's legs, and the other hand, along with her arm, held up Murphy's back and neck, and let her head rest on his arm. Then he carried Murphy back to the bed and carefully covered her with a quilt. Yang himself still had to take a bath. After taking a bath, he came out refreshed and found the children in the yard. Mo Shaoan was looking after them. Of course, sometimes it was better not to expect others to take care of your children. Mo Shaoan, this careless person, was like this. She sat on a small stone bench next to her, swiping her phone and looking up from time to time. The children played by themselves. However, when Yang came, Shi and Lan Xian were also playing happily. Tong Tong also participated. The little guy was giggling happily at the side, moving his chubby legs and running around with his sisters. What are you playing? Yang asked Mo Shaoan to busy herself with work. He went over to take care of the three little fellows. Then he walked over and asked Shi and Lan Xian with a smile. Papa, we play that game. You have to turn around, cover your eyes and count the words, and then turn around. Then I can't move. I can only move when you count the words, and then I can't be seen by you. We often play it at school. She stood on her tiptoes and explained enthusiastically to her father. And then Momo keeps getting caught. Haha, it's so funny. Lan Xian pointed at Tong Tong and shouted loudly. No. Tong Tong didn't take it to heart. He just smiled happily and waved his hands as he said in a childish voice. But even if Tao Wu is discovered, he can't be punished. He still can't play the hunter game. He doesn't know how to play it. Shi said. So Tao Wu will always be the first to be eliminated. Yang figured out what game the three little guys were playing. He had seen it in a book before. It was a classic children's game from the last century. 1, 2, 3 Wood Man. However, Shi and the others seemed to have learned the game from others. They didn't know the name of the game yet. At this time, Lan Xian had an idea. She looked at Yang expectantly and said, Papa Yang, do you want to play with us? Before Yang answered, Shi shook her head and said, No, Papa needs to sleep. Mom said that Papa didn't sleep last night because he wanted to catch the bad guys. His daughter's words were full of concern. Yang was moved. He reached out and stroked the little girl's soft hair lovingly. It's okay. Papa is not very sleepy. Yang smiled and said, By the way, where are we going to play today? Mama is going to sleep. Only Papa will play with you. Tong Tong stood aside and looked at his father with his big watery eyes. He listened for a while and was interested in talking. He pulled his father's trousers, raised his little head, and asked with his pink little mouth, Where's Mom? Mama is sleeping. Yang explained. But Papa also needs to sleep. At the side, Cece reluctantly twisted her little butt, pouted her little mouth, and said reluctantly, Mama said that Papa wants to sleep. She also said that we can't be willful. That's right. Daddy Yang, you've already defeated the big baddie, you need to sleep. Lan Xian said seriously. Let's not go play. It's tiring to play. Lan Xian expressed Cece's thoughts and the little girl nodded. Although she still wanted to go and play, and was a little reluctant to leave, she nodded very firmly at this moment. Yang gently raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, We're not going to play? Shi and Lan Xian looked at each other and reached an agreement. They giggled and said, Let's play tomorrow. Yang didn't expect the two little girls to be so sensible today. Although Yang knew that Murphy's advice should be credited, Shi and Lan Xian suppressed their desire to play. It wasn't easy. Since when did you know how to take care of people? Yang rubbed the two little girls' heads lovingly and said with a smile. Okay. Since we're not going to play, we'll stay at home. I'll ask Grandpa and Grandma to accompany you. When I wake up in the afternoon, We'll go to Baobei City and play in a very high building. Okay? Okay. Shishi nodded her little head happily. Yang Yi and his family's trip to Baodao during the Dragon Boat Festival came to an end. They had to leave the next day and go back to Jiangcheng. After all, the two little girls had to go back to school, and the end of the semester was approaching. However, the interesting news that Yang Yi and Murphy brought to the entertainment circle during their trip to Baodao was still constantly being updated and spread. At the beginning, the media enthusiastically reported on Zhou Mingyu's first time on the concert stage. Everyone knew that Murphy's mother used to be an unknown singer in Harbor City. However, it wasn't until today that everyone had the opportunity to hear her singing when the fan video of the concert was released. Not only was the news reporting, but the netizens' comments were also full of praise. Murphy's mother sings so well. No wonder Murphy can sing so well. It turns out that she has such a great mother who raised her since she was young. I love Woman Flower. Murphy and Murphy's mother sang so well that I, a 30-year-old auntie, cried. Murphy used to say that her mother was very trendy in an interview. Today I see that it's true. Murphy's mother's cheongsam is really stunning. It's just like the song Woman Flower. It's so beautiful. However, on the second night after the concert, some of the entertainment public accounts on micro-broadcasting released the news that others had given them. Yang Yi and Murphy ran out to ride motorcycles in the middle of the night, and were discovered by fans. It's so romantic. Yang Yi and Murphy unexpectedly appeared in Keelung. Fans, they went to see the sunrise. Rich people's toys. Yang Yi and Murphy rode motorcycles, and were asked for autographs by fans. There were all kinds of headlines, but they were actually stating the same truth. The excited gas station employees sent the photos to many entertainment VIPs in order to tell others that they had taken photos with Yang Yi and Murphy. Seeing this news, the fans were suddenly in an uproar. Although a small number of people were nitpicking and criticizing Yang Yi and Murphy for doing such a dangerous thing as public figures. However, most of the fans couldn't help but be envious and jealous. The comments below were very interesting. I'm exhausted after the concert. Now I find out that the two most tired people actually sneaked out to be romantic behind our backs. What should I do? I feel like I've been betrayed. I'm going to be jealous. I had nothing to do in the middle of the night, so I was stuffed with dog food. Why don't I have a girlfriend to play with me? Wow, I can't help but cry. Only Yang Yi and Murphy know how to play. Others are showing off their love in front of the camera and pretending to be happy. They're showing off their love behind the camera. And I'm going to eat this dog food. Who still dares to say that Yang Yi and Murphy are only husband and wife on the surface? They're living a poetic life, okay? Li Man, are you divorced from our Supreme Doe? Don't use our Supreme Doe to create hype, okay? I've never seen you showing off your love outside of the camera. There seemed to be a strange comment mixed in. But it didn't matter. The fans continued to express their envy and jealousy. Excuse me, is the sunrise in Keelung really that beautiful? No, the sunrise in Keelung isn't the most beautiful. The most beautiful place is in Kenting. The sunrise and sunset are beautiful. I have to refute this. The most beautiful place should be Mount Ali, okay? Watching the sunrise in the clouds and sea of fog is really beautiful. Let me ask weakly. You're discussing it so intensely, but do you have a girlfriend? You're dead set, old heart. Chapter 11:26. June for little Ruarua is happy. Although there was no Children's Day, the hot summer brought him a cool swimming pool. What game could be better than jumping into a big swimming pool to play in this unbearably hot summer day? Yes, after returning from Taiwan, Yang Yi had asked someone to clean up the swimming pool in the backyard of the villa. This was the top-notch entertainment facility that Shishi had been looking forward to for a long time. It was the weekend. Cece was still reading upstairs because she was about to face a new final exam. The little girl, who had messed up her exam last semester and had given up the first place, didn't dare to relax this time. The closer it was to the exam, the more nervous she was and the more serious she was. Yang Yi and Murphy were downstairs talking and laughing as they organized the fresh flowers they bought today. Murphy was the one who arranged the flowers while Yang-yi helped her cut the branches and leaves and put them into the trash bag. Tong Tong held the ball and played with it for a while. He felt a little bored, so he threw the ball away and ran towards the stairs. No adults to support him? It didn't matter. Little Momo was now very adept at climbing the stairs. His left hand held the pillar of the handrail, and his right hand was placed flat beside him to maintain his balance. Then he struggled to lift his right leg, climbed up a step, and followed with his left leg. He climbed up the stairs with his right leg and followed with his left. Just like that, he climbed up to the second floor in a short while. Once they were upstairs, things would be much easier on the flat ground. The little fellow grinned and happily trotted over. Big sister, big sister. He pushed open his sister's door and timidly poked his head in. When he saw his sister sitting in front of the desk, he smiled and ran 2 steps forward to throw himself on his sister's lap. Little brother, what's wrong? She put down her pen and looked at him confusedly. Perhaps the pressure of preparing for the exams was too great, but there was an indescribable and unresolvable sadness between the girl's eyebrows. Go, go, go swimming. Little Pie giggled. The little guy's language ability was much better than other children of his age, but his vocabulary was still very limited. It was a little difficult for him to express his thoughts, but he still tried his best to say it. Tong Tong was still holding his sister's hand as they walked out. The little guy's hand was actually very small, so he could only hold his sister's index finger. This was his favorite position. No, I still need to read. She shook her head, pouted, and said, the exam is tomorrow. I can't not study. Otherwise, I won't do well in the exam. Tong Tong looked at his sister in confusion. He did not know why his sister did not want to play with him. Usually his sister loved to play with him. At least, in Tong Tong's opinion, his sister loved him the most. Therefore Tong Tong did not give up. He turned around, pointed outside, and looked back at his sister, blinking his big eyes. Although he did not speak, the little guy's big bright eyes seemed to be able to say, Sister, do you see my big, innocent, and irresistible eyes? Let's go out and play. She was a little moved, but in the end she shook her head and said, No, little brother, no. I want to read. Go find Papa and ask him to take you swimming. Little Momo had no choice but to pout her little mouth and go downstairs in a sullen mood. Exiner, don't you need to study? Tong Tong, who was slowly and carefully coming down the stairs, heard his father's voice downstairs. Ah, Papa Yang, what do I need to study? Lon Xian replied absent-mindedly. Hearing Lon Xian's voice, Tong Tong's eyes lit up, and his little face glowed with joy again. Lon Xian was too bored at home, so she came to play with Shi. However, it was obvious that Shi was going to cultivate in seclusion today. After she went upstairs, she ran down helplessly. Papa Yang, did you cook anything good today? I'll bring it up for you to eat with Shi. Lon Xian did not ask, but swallowed her words, because little Rusty Frog couldn't wait to run over and pull her hand. Half an hour later, Yang-yi brought the 2 children, who had already changed into their swimsuits, to the backyard. Tong Tong was still happily hugging his little swimming ring as he followed behind his father. To ensure safety, Yang-yi asked someone to add an automatic cover to the swimming pool. After pressing a button, the cover closed with a click of the button. After a while, Yang-yi let Lon Xian and Tong Tong play in the water. There was a water circulation system under the swimming pool, so there was no need to change the water every day. However, the water under the cover was very cool. After Lon Xian entered the water, she made a big fuss. Tong Tong, who was still standing by the pool and waiting for his father to carry him, giggled. TSK, come down quickly. I want to have a swimming competition with you. Lon Xian shouted. Her swimming skills were on the same level as Cece's. In fact, due to her figure, it was even easier for Lon Xian to float on the surface of the water. Hence, the little girl swam effortlessly in the pool. Her swimming posture was also as graceful as the Little Mermaid's. Tong Tong understood the word competition. Usually when they were eating, his mother would coax him by saying, TSK, you should compete with your sister. Let's see who can eat faster. Therefore, the little boy giggled and could not wait to reach out to his father. He replied in a childish voice, Okay. However, How could he compare to Sister Xian Air? After the little boy soaked in the water, his little feet flopped around. For a long time he did not move at all. He was like a little buoy, stuck in the water. Lan Xian was so happy playing in the water that she had forgotten that she wanted to have a swimming competition with Tong Tong. She paddled her arms in the water and swam past Tong Tong. Tong Tong grinned. His two little arms, which were held by the swimming ring, waved happily and slapped the water with his little palms. However, to his surprise, Lan Xian swam over and stuck her feet out of the water. Smack, smack, smack. 2 consecutive hits. Suddenly, the water splashed and splashed Tong Tong's face. Tui tui tui. Tong Tong was caught off guard and splashed with water. This time his face and hair were wet. He could only use his little hands to wipe his face carelessly. The way he winked at others made him look very pitiful. Haha. Come tsk, let's learn how to swim here. Yang Yi, who was next to him, laughed heartily. Then he pulled the little boy's swimming ring and brought him away from the troublesome place. However, although his face was splashed with water, little Tao Chen wasn't frightened and didn't cry out loud. After he wiped off the water droplets on his face, his eyes sparkled as he looked at Sister Xian and excitedly kicked his feet under the water, as if he wanted to chase after Sister Xian and play with her. Playing with water. What fun would there be if there were no splashes? Chapter 1127. Cece was usually soft and gentle, like a little girl with no temper. However, when she was doing something she liked, such as the stage performances and handicrafts she had participated in when she was in kindergarten, or the dance competition she had participated in last year, the little girl could erupt with a tenacity that surprised even Yang Yi. She had a strong desire to win and she practiced very seriously. Even if she had stage fright at the beginning, and her little face was tense, she worked hard to do her best, without the slightest thought of retreating. This was a good thing. Therefore, when Shishi told her father that she was worried about not doing well in the final exam, Yang Yi also supported her to study hard and do her best to prepare for the final exam. Why didn't he ease Shishi's mind? Let her let go of this obsession? Because Yang Yi knew that there were some knots that needed to be untied by Shishi herself. In Yang Yi's previous life, from the time he was ignorant and sensible, he had been struggling on the edge of life and death. At that time, he realized the law of the jungle. If you want to survive, you can only rely on yourself. If you always fantasize about being comforted and helped by others, then only death awaited you. Only by constantly improving your own strength could you exchange for a chance of survival. Although Shishi didn't need to face that cruel world, and she also had Yang Yi's protection, she could continue to grow up innocently and carefreely. However, Yang Yi didn't want his daughter to grow up to be a little sheep. Yang Yi would also silently follow behind the challenges that she should face, and let Shishi think of her own solutions. Just like this exam. Yang Yi could indeed tell Shishi that she didn't need to care about this exam or two. Even if she didn't do well in the exam, her life could still be very exciting. But was it really good to do so? Reading too much of chicken soup literature would make one cowardly. Maybe she didn't care about the exam this time, but next time, and the time after that? Maybe Shishi would become lazy and not care about the exam. Would she still need to study? I don't care if my results are good or bad. I might as well lie at home all day and act like a salted fish. Therefore, instead of feeding Shishi chicken soup for the soul, Yang Yi would rather let her take the risk. Yang Yi had confidence in Shishi's IQ and academic performance. Perhaps if the young lady prepared so seriously, she would be able to do well in the exams. She might even be able to get first place and untie the knot in his heart. Yang Yi also knew that as long as Shishi did well in the exams, she wouldn't be afraid the next time the term ended. Of course, if Shishi didn't do well in the exams, it wouldn't be too late for Yang Yi to intervene and counsel her. Everyone downstairs was playing, and only Shishi was upstairs reading seriously. Of course, Yang Yi's heart ached for her. After playing for a while, Yang Yi looked at the time and realized that it was around 10:30 p.m. The young lady had been upstairs reading for more than an hour. He asked Murphy to look after Tong Tong while he got up, and went upstairs to call Shishi down to eat some fruit. The young lady was very obedient. After her father coaxed her for a while, She obediently came to the side of the pool. Murphy had already cut the cantaloupe and placed it on the coffee table next to the beach chair. Lon Exine was sitting at the side, eating to replenish her energy. Shishi, have some cantaloupe. It's super sweet. Lon Exine saw Shishi coming down and immediately shouted excitedly. She even enthusiastically took a piece and gave it to Shishi. She giggled and said, "It's really sweet. I ate a few pieces. It's sweeter than candy." When Shishi saw how happy her little friend was, the worry on her face faded a lot. She put on a more relaxed smile and took the cantaloupe. She laughed and said, "Hee Exiner, you also swam? I thought only my brother wanted to swim." Lon Exine didn't have time to talk. She ate another piece of cantaloupe. Murphy cut the cantaloupe into smaller pieces. This way, adults could eat one piece at a time, and it wouldn't be easy for children to eat it. It would be sticky all over their faces. Lon Exine's mouth was stuffed with cantaloupe. After a while she finished eating. Only then did she have a chance to talk. "It's too hot. I think swimming is very comfortable. Cece, why don't you come and swim too? I want to compete with you. Your brother can't swim. It's not fun." Lon Exine looked at Shishi expectantly. Yang Yi listened to their conversation. At this time, he smiled and patted Shishi's shoulder. She was still a little hesitant. He said, "Go and play. You've been reading for so long this morning. You can play for a while. It won't be too late to continue reading in the afternoon. We need to strike a balance between work and rest." Shishi didn't know what a balance between work and rest was. She was persuaded by her father. Maybe it was because the weather was too hot. After standing outside for a while, the little girl's little face was oozing with sweat. The comfortable feeling of swimming was also calling her. Okay then. The final exam seemed to give Shishi a lot of pressure. When they went to bed at night, Yang Yi and Mo Fei were talking about some adult topics in bed. Suddenly, their bedroom door was gently knocked twice. In fact, the door wasn't locked, but the soundproofing was good. If they didn't shout loudly, the people outside wouldn't hear them. But if they shouted loudly, Tong Tong would still be sleeping in her small bed next to them. Yang Yi jumped out of bed and went to open the door. When the door opened, Yang Yi was surprised to see the little girl in a nightgown. She was holding her cartoon pillow and standing there pitifully. "Papa, can I sleep with you and Mom?" Shishi looked at her father and asked in a soft voice. Shishi hadn't asked to sleep with her parents for a long time. Moreover, she was usually quite brave. Last time when they went to Taiwan, Lon Exine was so scared by the dark yard that she didn't dare to sleep. Shishi was very brave and calmly fell asleep. However, before Yang Yi asked, Shishi pouted and explained, because the exam is tomorrow, I won't be so nervous if I sleep with Papa and Mom." He didn't know how Shishi's logic was built, but sometimes, a girl's emotions were unreasonable. Yang Yi also felt his daughter's weakness. Seeing the little girl's helplessness, how could he refuse? "Come in." Yang Yi smiled and rubbed the little girl's head. He said, "Sleep well tonight, and we'll do well in the exam tomorrow." Perhaps influenced by her father's positive mood, Cece also beamed with joy. She giggled and ran past her father. She quickly climbed onto the bed and stepped on the quilt. Then she cheered and threw herself in the middle of the quilt. Only then did she raise her little head and giggle with her mother. Murphy helped her put the small pillow in place. Then she laughed and pinched the little girl's nose. She said, "What time is it? Why aren't you sleeping?" "Because I have an exam tomorrow." The little girl turned over and lay on her back on the quilt. She said confidently, "Then you have to sleep quickly. Moreover, your brother is asleep and you're still talking so loudly. Hurry up, cover yourself with the quilt and go to sleep. I'm going to turn off the light soon." Murphy threatened. After a burst of laughter mixed with Shishi's laughter, Shishi finally got what she wanted. She comfortably lay in the middle of her father and mother. It felt good to be surrounded. It gave her a sense of security. "Papa." In the dark, the little girl who didn't want to sleep blinked her big eyes. Let me tell you, this trick was taught to me by little Fishy. She said that before the exam, she always let her mom sleep with her." She whispered, as if she was afraid that her mother would hear it. Of course Murphy heard it. However, she didn't interrupt. Now that you're sleeping with Daddy and Mommy, does that mean that you won't be nervous tomorrow? Young-yi asked with a smile. Hee, I don't know. The little girl mischievously stuck out her little tongue. But in the dark, nothing could be seen. It's just a final exam. You see, Daddy and Mommy are supporting you, so you don't have to be nervous. Go for the exam normally. Daddy believes that you can do well. Young-yi encouraged. And then, the little girl hugged her father's arm and comfortably hummed. In addition, Daddy also wants to give you courage. At this time, Young-yi suddenly had an idea. He turned into a big charlatan. He used his big hand to cover Shishi's eyes. His voice was very bewitching as he said, "Do you feel it? It's very warm courage." Warm courage? The little girl was skeptical. Yes. Young-yi mysteriously said, "Daddy will lend you my courage for one day. Like this, you will definitely do well in tomorrow's exam. You have to believe in Daddy's courage." So powerful? Shishi muttered in a daze. After being covered by her father's hand for a while, Shishi began to feel a little sleepy. It's really that powerful. Young-yi removed his hand and said with certainty, "Then I also want to become as powerful as Daddy." The little girl believed it. With a heart full of joy, she sweetly fell asleep. Chapter 11:28. Shishi's expression was much calmer when she woke up in the morning after receiving the boost of courage from her father. Young-yi sent her and Lan Exayan to school. When they were about to say goodbye, Young-yi turned his head and smiled. "Shishi, do your best for the exam. When you're done, we can go out and play. Lu Weisha will also come over to look for you." Young-yi only wanted the little girl to have a good attitude for the exam. Who knew that after he said that, Shishi would become anxious? The little girl quickly stood up from the back seat. She hugged the back of her father's seat with one hand and covered his big mouth with the other. "No, you can't think like that." Shishi pouted and said anxiously, "That's right, I thought like that last time, and then I forgot to write my name." When Young-yi heard this, he almost couldn't hold back his laughter. Fortunately, he stopped smiling and reached out to rub the little girl's head. He said, "Well then, do your best for the exam. Dad will wait for your good news." Actually, Shishi was just giving herself pressure. When the exam officially started and the little girl received the first English test paper, she calmed down again. It's still so easy." Shishi tilted her head and glanced at the questions on the test paper. Of course, this time the little girl, who had a superb memory, wouldn't make the same mistake as the last time. Before answering the questions, the little girl first wrote her name on the paper, stroke by stroke. Then it was Shishi's showtime. Recently, Murphy's work had come to an end. Young-yi, on the other hand, had started to have more things to do. After all, he had 3 works that were going to be shown to the audience soon. One was The Shawshank Redemption, which was created and written by him, and the other was Frozen, which was produced by Young-yi and taken more than a year by the animation production company that he had a stake in. These 2 movies would be released during the summer vacation. Although they didn't form a direct competitive relationship, as the audiences of the 2 movies were too different, they were movies that were released at the same time. In the future, they would definitely be compared by the media. The promotional period for these 2 movies had arrived. Young-yi couldn't favor one and discriminate against the other. He had to cheer for both of them. In addition to developing micro-broadcasting, he would occasionally attend their promotional activities. However, with Young-yi's status, other than the promotional activities in Jiangcheng, he basically wouldn't accept any invitations, and no one dared to criticize him. However, today, after sending Shishi and Lan Exayan to their exams, Young-yi came to Jiangnan TV station to attend a press conference. He wasn't there to promote the 2 movies, but to announce that the TV series, Yuzue, would be broadcasted on Jiangnan TV station. With I Am a Singer, which was very popular in the first half of this year, and In the Name of XX, which was directed by Chen Fengchen, which was currently being filmed and produced, the cooperation between Jiangnan TV station and Young-yi was in the honeymoon period. Originally, Young-yi didn't intend to give Yuzue to Jiangnan TV station, because according to Young-yi's memory, this was a web series, which should have become popular from the internet. He didn't know if it would continue to be popular in the previous world, if it was released directly on TV. However, Wu Xiangdong, the director of Jiangnan TV station, somehow found out that Guizi was the main supporting role in this TV series, and that he had a very important part in it. Therefore, he personally came to Yang Yi and asked for the rights to broadcast Yuzue. Jiangnan TV station allocated the best time slot for the TV series during the summer vacation. Regardless of whether this was an abuse of power for personal gain, Yang Yi was the beneficiary, so he didn't care too much about it. At the press conference in the morning, Yang Yi, the main actors of Yuzue, and the director, Du Yuanlei, were interviewed by the reporters. Teacher Yang Yi. A reporter raised his hand and asked. He didn't know when it started, but the reporters had started to call Yang Yi teacher. Perhaps, Yang Yi had gained a certain social status with his wealth. There are rumors on the internet that Yang Huan is the female lead in this TV series, and that she was chosen by you, teacher Yang Yi. What do you think of this rumor? Yang Yi said calmly. There's no such thing as me choosing the female lead. The casting is decided by the director. However, since Yang Huan fits the role well, and she has good skills to play the role, why don't we choose her? In other words, if there are two candidates, one is Yang Huan, and the other is a girl who also knows martial arts, teacher Yang, you will still choose Yang Huan, right? The reporter asked slyly. Yang Yi wouldn't fall for his trick. He smiled and said, then you have to ask director Du after all. She was the one who decided the casting. I only found out about it after confirming the role. Du Yuanlei took over the conversation. Just like before, she replied quickly, there's no second candidate. Since my audition, there hasn't been another actress like Yang Huan. She can fight, dares to fight, is beautiful, and is conscientious. Which director wouldn't choose such an actress? Not being able to trick Yang Yi, the reporter sat down angrily. At the press conference, Yang Yi was not the only star. Yang Huan and Guizi were also the focus of attention. After all, they were regular guests of the popular variety show The Limit Challenge, so they were quite famous. Guizi, why did you accept the role of Yin Debiao? As far as we know, in order to broaden your acting career, you have been trying to lose weight in the past year, and you have achieved good results. However, in order to play the role of Yin Debiao well, you have put on a lot of weight. Aren't you repeating the same mistake? The reporter asked. Because this role is very interesting. Although it's just a supporting role, I think I can play it well, Guizi said with a smile. Besides, look at me now. I've lost weight again, haven't I? And I've become a lot darker. I think if I lose a little more weight, I can compete with Brother Zhang for the role of Yuzue. After saying that, Guizi looked at Zhang Song, the actor who played Yuzue, and smiled. That's not enough. You've lost weight, but your face is still round. Zhang Song also teased Guizi. It had to be said that Guizi did lose a lot of weight, and become a lot darker. In the past 2 months, as long as Guizi had no work arrangements, he would accompany Ding Xiang to visit the villages in Guangdong province. The summer sun in Guangdong province was even hotter, and the two of them were tanned, which made them look more like a couple. Yang Huan often teased them like this. In the evening, Yang Yi went to school to pick up Shishi. How was the exam? Yang Yi asked with a smile. The little girl was no longer as gloomy as she had been for the past few days. Her brows were no longer furrowed, and her big, shiny black eyes were sparkling with joy. Just like Lanxin, it was summer vacation soon. It's very easy. Papa, I can do it all. She said to her father happily. Me, I can do it too. Papa Yang, I think I will do well in the exam this time. Lan Xian jumped in front of Yang Yi, as if she was expecting Yang Yi to praise her. Lan Xian didn't lie. She thought she did well in the exam. Maybe she was the kind of candidate who could perform on the spot? That's great. You did well in the exam. Your uncle Fujun sent us some fresh prawns and Spanish mackerel from Guangdong province. Tonight, I will cook a delicious seafood dinner to reward you, Yang Yi said with a smile. By the way, have you written your names? Don't forget it this time. Yang Yi asked this question mainly to Shishi, but Lan Xian was also there, so he asked both of them. But Lan Xian didn't listen to the latter part of the question. As soon as she got into the car, she sat in the back seat, raised her arms and cheered. Yeah, let's have a big meal. On the other hand, Cece was more serious. She quickly hugged the back of the driver's seat and eagerly said to her father, Papa, let me tell you, I didn't forget to write my name. Then I finished the question and even checked it 3 times. Chapter 11:29. This didn't mean that she could have a break after finishing her final exams. Because this was the end of the school year, the school held a summary meeting on Tuesday. After the meeting in the morning, the class teacher held a small class meeting in the afternoon. She made a simple summary, arranged summer homework, organized the children to clean their classrooms, and so on. However, Li Ruolin had an important announcement to make in the first grade's class 3. After the group leaders distributed the summer homework, Li Ruolin stood at the podium with a serious expression. Looking at the innocent smiles on the little kids' faces, she didn't know what to say. But she still had to say it. Children, it's been a few months since we found Xiaoya in the school's hygiene area. Li Ruolin said gently as she carried Xiaoya's birdcage to the front of the podium. She and the rest didn't know what the teacher meant, so they all looked at her with curious eyes. In the past few months, all of you have taken very good care of the injured little girl. Whether it was the members of our care group on duty, or the other children who were willing to help, all of you have done very well. Li Ruolin listed some examples emotionally. When she heard this, she thought that the teacher was praising them. She was very happy and puffed out her chest. Although some of the children in the class couldn't wait to whisper to each other, and the chatter was very chaotic, Cece still followed the order of the class very seriously as usual. However, she still whispered in her heart, Hee, that's right. This morning, I fed Xiaoya with everyone and even helped her clean the birdcage. However, Shishi's happiness didn't last long, because Li Ruolin continued. Last week, I brought Xiaoya back. Not only did I bring it home, but I also brought it to the vet. The vet said that Xiaoya's wings have healed, and it can fly in the sky like before. At this moment, the classroom quieted down again. The children seemed to feel something as they all widened their eyes and stared at Li Ruolin. So it's also time for us to say goodbye to Xiaoya and send it back to nature, so that it can find its own home, and enjoy the free life that it originally deserved. Li Ruolin pretended to laugh lightly and said, Actually, teacher has told you about this before, hasn't she? Xiaoya belongs to the sky. If she can't fly in the sky, she won't be happy. But no matter how relaxed she sounded, she couldn't withstand the uproar brought about by this matter. Xiaoya is leaving? Xiaoya wants to go home? The little fellows burst into an uproar. They didn't know that Li Ruolin already had such a plan. She was only afraid that it would affect the mood of the children before the exam, so she delayed it until today. She looked at Teacher Li in disbelief, then at the little girl who was still jumping around in the cage on the table. Her little hand covered her mouth that was already wide open in shock, and her big eyes started to mist up. Lu Xiaoyu turned her head around and asked in confusion, Shishi, what does the teacher mean? Why should we say goodbye to Xiaoya? Is it because it's the holidays? No, teacher. Teacher said to let Xiaoya go home, go back to nature. She pursed her little mouth and said sadly. At this moment, the sorrowful little lady couldn't care about the class discipline anymore. Moreover, the entire classroom was bubbling up like a fish pond that had exploded, and everyone was talking. Lu Xiaoyu was a little late in realization and asked in astonishment. Ah? Doesn't that mean that we won't be able to see Xiaoya in the future? That's right. She felt aggrieved as tears rolled down her cheeks. The sparkling and translucent crystal beads pattered down. Little Yuer, don't say any more. I'm about to cry. Sob, Shishi, don't cry. When I see you cry, I want to cry too. Lu Xiaoyu said as she started to cry herself. This was going to be lively. Yang Yi didn't know anything about this. When he came to pick up Shishi in the evening, the little lady ran all the way home and threw herself into his arms, sobbing sadly. Lan Xian was no exception, but she ran a little slower. When she came over, the seat was already taken by Shishi. She could only hug Shishi and cry sadly at the back. What's wrong with you two? Who bullied you? Yang Yi saw this scene out of the blue and suddenly felt a little angry. He thought that Shishi and Lan Xian had been bullied by someone in school. Why were they crying so sadly? One had to know that Shishi sighed. Lon Xian's emotions were usually very stable. Unless you deliberately teased her with delicious food, didn't let her eat, or bullied her, then she would cry. Otherwise, it seemed like there was nothing that could shake her emotions. But today Lon Xian was also bawling her eyes out. Looking at the two little girls crying, Shishi could still wipe her tears on her father's clothes, but Lon Xian could only rely on herself. Her two little hands were pinched together like orchid fingers, and she used her two ring fingers to rub her eyelids. Her eyes, cheeks, nose, and lips were all red from crying. Yang Yi saw this scene. How could Yang Yi not be anxious and angry? No. Shishi shook her little head in her father's arms. After a while, she raised her teary little face and said in a choked voice. After hearing Shishi's explanation, Yang Yi then understood the whole story. So, you haven't said goodbye to Xiaoya today, and you'll come back to school tomorrow before sending Xiaoya home, right? Yang Yi secretly heaved a sigh of relief and asked softly. Li Ruolin probably found that the situation was a little strange, so she first comforted the little ones and let them have a night's psychological buffer before sending Xiaoya off tomorrow. Shishi raised her head to look at her father with teary eyes and said sadly, But Papa, I still can't bear to leave. I like Xiaoya so much. Can you ask Teacher Li not to send Xiaoya back? That's right. Lon Xian also nodded. She raised her crying eyes to look at Yang Yi and asked hopefully, Papa Yang, can we let Xiaoya stay in our house? I'll let Bai stay in your house, and then Xiaoya will stay in our house. It won't leave, okay? Yang Yi called the two little girls to get into the car. It was not good to be seen as a joke by others on the road crying. After closing the car door, Yang Yi said softly, Although Xiaoya can stay in your house, but after all, the cage is not her home. She doesn't like to live in a cage, but wants to be able to fly freely in the sky. However, Yang Yi's thinking was too simple. He couldn't coax the two little girls like this. Oh, you're exactly like what teacher said. She pouted and said unhappily. Chapter 11:30. It seemed that his daughter had grown up. She knew more and more, and it was getting harder and harder to coax her. Yang Yi thought for a moment and changed his words. Think about it this way. Xiaoya lives in a cage and is being raised by us. In fact, it's the same as last year when Xian Air was disobedient and was locked up at home by your parents. They didn't let you watch TV or go out to play. Lon Xian's eyes showed a surprised expression, and her little mouth opened. Why? She asked, somewhat puzzled. Because Xiaoya has wings. She likes to fly. And Xian Air also wants to play. If we don't let Xiaoya do what she likes to do, isn't it like we don't let Xian Air do what she likes to do? Yang Yi gently explained. If we don't let Xian Air play, watch TV, or eat delicious food, won't she feel uncomfortable? Lon Xian seemed to understand something. She pouted her little mouth, shook her head, and cried out in fear. No. Let's give another example. If we lock Xiaoya in a bird cage and deprive her of the joy of flying, it's the same as if we took away all the dolls in Shishi's house and room, and didn't let her play in the future. In fact, it's the same feeling, Yang Yi said. At this moment it was Shishi's turn to be nervous. She anxiously and aggrievedly hugged the back of her father's driver's seat and stamped her feet. With tears in her eyes she asked, Why did you take away my dolls? I didn't really want to take away your dolls. Dad was just giving an example. Think about it, you were so sad just now. Xiaoya is the same. Her wings are healed, but she can't fly. Being locked in a cage by you, she lost the joy of life. Well, the joy of a bird's life. Yang Yi quickly pressed the little girl's shoulder, gently stroked her little head, and softly comforted her. She was stunned for a while. She gradually became downcast, pouted her little mouth, and said unhappily, But Xiaoya likes me very much. She likes to play with me. This morning I gave her food, and she even jumped onto my hand to play. Yang Yi could see that she actually understood what her father said and knew what she should do, but she was still not willing to believe in her own judgment. To put it bluntly, she was reluctant. Well, let's talk about it when we get home, okay? Dad knows you're upset. Let's go home and slowly think of a solution. Yang Yi said a few words of persuasion and drove the two girls home. After dinner, it was time for them to take a stroll by the lakeshore. It was rare for Cece to not run in front by herself. Instead, she stuffed her small hand into her father's big palm and asked him to take her for a walk with her with a gloomy expression. Needless to say, she was in a very bad mood. Little Momo originally wanted to run a race with his sister, but his sister wasn't interested today, so he could only run by himself. He held onto Steamed Bun's leash and laughed, shaking his little, but as he ran in front of them, Yang Yi used his eyes to signal Murphy to follow Tong Tong, while he slowly walked at the back with Shishi to relieve her boredom. Sometimes, we will inevitably encounter situations where we need to be separated. Because every person or family is a small world, they will have their own arrangements. Yang Yi considered his words carefully and said softly to Shishi. For example, we used to live above the coffee shop. Now that we moved here, we are neighbors with Xian Air. But for us at that time, we also said goodbye to the familiar environment and the beautiful flower bed. Shishi hugged her father's big hand with her two little hands and leaned against her father's side more and more. Perhaps it was because of the cool breeze on the tree-lined path by the lakeshore at night. But actually there's nothing to worry about. We're already used to living in the villa here. We're used to having Xian or come here often to eat and drink, right? Yang Yi smiled and joked. Xian came to play with me. Cece unwillingly shook her father's arm and muttered in a low voice. Haha, let's not use Xian Air as an example. Let's talk about Lu Weisha. Yang Yi smiled and continued. When Lu Weisha came back to China, weren't you very sad? I remember that you also cried like a baby, just like tonight. You used to be a pretty little girl, but now you are crying with snot and tears. You don't look pretty anymore. Oh. Shishi let out a long nasal sound and pouted her little mouth unhappily. This papa is so bad. He always teases me with such words. How can he say something so terrible? Yang Yi smiled and bent down to take a look, as if he wanted to see if Cece was still ugly. The little girl shook her head and refused to let him see. Yang Yi laughed heartily, straightened his back and continued. But it's still okay now. Although Lu Weisha went back to her country, she still keeps in touch with you. Moreover, she will come to play with you in a few days. How good is that? Don't you think so? Speaking of Lu Weisha, Shishi's mood did improve a little. She pursed her little mouth, held back a smile, and said, But Xiaoyu is different. If Xiaoyu leaves, she won't come back. Lu Weisha and I are good friends. Yang Yi didn't know that Shishi heard it from other boys. He was a little surprised that Shishi knew so much. But Xiaoyu is also your good friend. She can go back to nature and find her parents. She doesn't have to be alone anymore. How happy is that? We should be happy for it, shouldn't we? Yang Yi said softly. Xiaoyu wants to go back to find Papa and Mom? Shishi was stunned again. That's right. Every small animal has a father and mother. Even a bird has one. It has been recuperating outside for so long. Its father and mother must be very worried. Xiaoyu must also miss its father and mother very much. Yang Yi saw that there was hope, so he struck while the iron was hot. Under the street lights, Shishi's little face looked a little hesitant, but in the end, the kindness in Shishi's heart prevailed. She said softly, Then I'll let Xiaoyu go back to find her papa and mom. Otherwise, she will be very sad. That's right, Yang Yi said with a gratified smile. At this time, Cece unconsciously pursed her small mouth again. Her nose twitched, and her big eyes blinked. Sparkling and translucent tears rolled down like pearls from a broken necklace. The little girl took the opportunity to hug her father's neck, who was squatting down to comfort her, and said with a choked voice, But Papa, I'm still very sad. Dad understands. It's okay, it will be over. Yang Yi saw his daughter crying like a little tearful person, and his heart was broken. He got up, picked up Shishi, and let her cry in his arms. His big hand gently patted Shishi's back, and said softly. Yang Yi also knew that when Shishi told him that she was taking care of an injured bird in class, he expected that Shishi would have such a sad day. But he didn't expect that Shishi would cry so pitifully. Perhaps Shishi was also a very affectionate person? Yang Yi held his daughter by the lake and coaxed her. Fortunately, he was tall and strong, and had great strength. Otherwise, with Shishi's current height and weight, ordinary parents couldn't carry her. But as he coaxed her, Yang Yi's thoughts drifted a little. Damn, my daughter is so affectionate. In the future, if any stupid brat dares to play with her feelings, I will chop him to death. No, I have to take precautions. I have to guard against it and keep a close eye on it. Fire prevention, theft prevention, and boys prevention. I have to pay attention to this matter from a young age. I have to be on guard against that brat Nan Xiaoyu. He plays with Shishi and Xian Air every day. This brat can't be underestimated. By the way, I have to teach Xiaobao. He must be able to fight at least 10 people. Otherwise, how can he protect my sister? Chapter 1131. After being sad for an entire night, Shishi's mood was much better the next day after her father's persuasion. When she was eating breakfast in the morning, she had a white beard because of Tong Tong drinking milk. Shishi laughed for a long time because of this. Of course, she didn't remember that she had such a silly and cute appearance before. Today, Huijia Primary School was quiet, because the children had already been given a holiday yesterday. Other than the teachers who came back to grade the papers, the other children didn't need to come back to school. In addition, the teachers in the school administration were still busy preparing for the New Year's enrollment speech and entrance exam. Of course, this was also something that would happen this weekend. In contrast, Huijia Primary School's campus had lost its usual hustle and bustle. It was as quiet as an ordinary Jiangnan park. However, Shishi and the other children of the first grade class 3 still gathered at school. After all, they didn't want to send Xiaoyu away last night, so teacher Li Ruolin had to arrange it for today. At this moment, they were in the classroom, lining up to say goodbye to Xiaoyu. Shishi, why aren't you sad anymore? I still want to cry. Lu Xiaoyu's eyes were red as she said to her deskmate. Shishi wasn't sad, but her expression was a little serious. It's not that I'm not sad, but my papa said that it's a good thing that Xiaoyu left us. Because it wants to go back to its papa and mom. Xiaoyu also has a father and a mother? Lu Xiaoyu's little mouth was as round as an egg in surprise. Yes. Shishi followed suit. Just like how her father enlightened her yesterday, she started to enlighten Lu Xiaoyu. It had to be said that Shishi's words still had a certain weight in Lu Xiaoyu's heart. After a while, Lu Xiaoyu finally felt relieved. Okay, we should be happy for Xiaoyu. When the 2 girls went to say goodbye to Xiaoyu, they didn't cry like class leader Chao Ruolin and took off their glasses. They sincerely hugged the birdcage and whispered a lot to Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu, when you go home and see Papa and Mom, you must also miss me. I'll miss you too. Xiaoyu, you will come back to see us, right? I cried last night. Xiaoyu, did you cry? If you meet a bad guy, you must fly very, very high. Don't get hurt again. If it's as high as a plane, I won't be able to catch it. Yes. Hee. Although the children were still reluctant to part, it was close to noon. Li Ruolin could only harden her heart and ask them to set off to send Xiaoyu off. A group of children crowded around teacher Li, who was carrying a birdcage, and came to the hygiene area of their class, a corner of the small square, where they met Xiaoyu for the first time. It was the place where teacher Zhao met them with the injured Xiaoyu. They were ready to release Xiaoyu. Let's say goodbye to Xiaoyu again. Li Ruolin put the birdcage on the stone table in the school and said softly to Shishi and the others, because when we open the cage later, Xiaoyu may fly away. Li Ruolin did not think that Xiaoyu would be reluctant to part with her. After all, Xiaoyu was a wild bird, unlike domesticated pigeons. It had no feelings for humans. Of course, Li Ruolin would not tell the children this. Goodbye, Xiaoyu. When Shishi said this to her friends, she heard Chao Ruolin crying beside her. She was actually a little sad, but she remembered her father's advice to let Xiaoyu find its parents. She did not let herself fall into the sad situation yesterday. Moreover, Shishi was holding her small camera and taking pictures of Xiaoyu in the birdcage. The little girl, who wanted to leave some memories for Xiaoyu, was a little distracted from being sad. It was better to get the pain over with. Li Ruolin did not dawdle. She gently opened the birdcage and chirped, trying to call Xiaoyu out. Xiaoya probably did not understand what these humans were trying to do. It tilted its head and looked for a while before jumping out. Interestingly, Xiaoya did not fly away immediately like Li Ruolin said. It stepped on the stone table and jumped twice, then tilted its head and looked at the humans who were watching it. Xiaoya hasn't flown away yet. Lu Xiaoyu was about to cry, but now she seemed to see hope. She nervously and excitedly tugged at Xishi's clothes. But at this moment, Li Ruolin reached out and rubbed Xiaoya's long tail. She even hooked the little fella's round little butt. Xiaoya flapped its wings and took a big step forward. As if it felt that its wings were better, and found the feeling of flapping its wings, Xiaoya's next step was to flap its little wings and fly up. Wow! Although this action was not considered light, it still caused the children who were watching anxiously to exclaim. Xiaoya flew up. It did not fly away immediately. Instead, it flew to the tree branch above Xishi and the rest. As it used its little beak to comb its feathers, it turned its head and chirped a few times. It seemed to be a little reluctant. Li Ruolin struck while the iron was hot and said, "Look, Xiaoya is bidding farewell to all of you. It said that it is very grateful for your care for the past few months." Although this was made up by Li Ruolin, the first graders were all very naive, including Xishi. They all believed Teacher Li's words. Xishi's little face even revealed a happy smile. After all, her hard work was acknowledged and thanked by others. This was still very heartwarming. Even though there was still some lingering, Xiaoya was still a wild bird. After chirping twice, it flapped its wings again and flew up high. After a while, it flew past the branches of a few trees and disappeared from Xishi and the rest's sight. Xishi reluctantly put down the camera and looked in the direction that Xiaoya flew. Her eyes were actually red and she looked very pitiful. But today, the little girl promised her father not to make Xiaoya sad, so she did not cry and was very strong. The boys were fine. Although most of them were a little sad, after Xiaoya flew away, they calmed down. But there were a few girls who were crying. For example, the class monitor, Chao Ruoling, could not help but hug the teacher's leg and sob. "You are all great. Don't be sad. Although Xiaoya flew away, it will still remember how good you are to it." Li Ruolin comforted gently. My papa said, Xiaoya went to find its papa and mom. She stood up at this moment, her beautiful big eyes shining with a sincere light. Then wait until next spring. Xiaoya will fly back from a place where it is not cold. It might come back to play with us. Really? Chao Ruoling and a few other crying girls looked at Xishi in surprise, waiting for her confirmation. Really? My papa said. Xishi said firmly. A miracle appeared. With Shishi's words, the scene was no longer a chaotic scene of a group of crying children. Instead, Chao Ruoling and the rest surrounded Xishi with sadness and joy. They acted coquettishly and wanted Xishi to tell them more information. Let me tell you, Xiaoya also has a papa and mom, because its papa and mom are like chicks, laying eggs and then hatching them. The little girl really explained to her classmates enthusiastically. Chapter 1132. Although she did not cry when she sent Xiaoya off, Xishi was not in a good mood for the next few days. In addition to Xiaoya, it was also because Lan Xian was not at home to play with her. After Lan Xian's summer vacation, she would go back to her hometown with Lan Haokai for a week. Originally, Lan Xian also invited Xishi to go back with her, but considering the media's annoyance, Lan Haokai's inability to take care of her and other factors, Yang Yi did not let her go. Because of this, Xishi was still angry for half a day. Why was it only half a day? Because when she woke up the next day, the little girl's anger had subsided. Early in the morning, she was full of energy and pestered her father to play table tennis with her. Of course, Yang Yi also wanted to go back to his hometown to visit his family during the summer vacation, but now was not the time. Murphy rested for half a month, and her work arrangements began again. In addition to a concert, there was also the more important finals of I Am a Singer. In addition, Yang Yi also had work to do in the promotion of the movie, so he could only postpone the visit to his hometown until the end of the summer vacation. It was worth mentioning that Xishi had improved rapidly in the past few days, perhaps because she was working hard, to play table tennis with her father. Originally, she only knew how to catch the ball in a hurry, but now, she could even hit her father twice. Looking at her long legs running briskly and her thin arms waving the table tennis racket, she was actually playing well. After a few days, when she learned from Lu Weisha that she would be coming to China to play with her, she finally got rid of her previous depression and became happy again. Papa, Lu Weisha said that she will be coming on Friday. The little girl ran downstairs and jumped into her father's arms happily. She smiled and said, "Hee, she has already know Lu Weisha's papa and mom have already bought plane tickets." This is great. Yang Yi hadn't seen his daughter smile so happily for a long time. He couldn't help but smile and say, "Did you tell Lu Weisha? They don't have to worry about not having a place to stay since Xian Air's father has prepared a temporary house for them." Some of the villas in this villa district were empty. It wasn't that they couldn't be sold. As the most high-end villa district in Rivertown, it was impossible for the houses here to not be sold. Many rich people in Shanghai came to Jiang City to buy houses, because Jiang City was very close to Shanghai. However, Lan Zhaokai was very shrewd. When the market opened, he only sold half of the villas and kept the other half as reserves. Every year, he sold a few of them sporadically. By doing this, on the one hand, he could limit the number of residents and ensure that the residents who had already moved in could enjoy a better living experience. On the other hand, Lan Zhaokai also secretly limited the identity and status of the buyers. Occasionally, he could also use this to win favors. Let's not talk about these business matters. Lan Zhaokai knew that Lan Xian and Shishi's kindergarten friends were going to come to China from Sweden. Lu Weisha's father was an executive of Wall Motors, so he generously asked someone to take care of a villa that was originally reserved for receiving guests for Lu Weisha's family to stay in temporarily. "I've already told Lu Weisha." Shishi nodded seriously and smiled at her father. "I told Lu Weisha that you don't have to stay in a hotel. You can stay near my house. In this way, we can visit each other." After the little girl finished speaking, her big eyes sparkled with excitement. She half knelt on the sofa, held her father's arm, and begged, "Papa, can we go to Lu Weisha's house to have a look?" Haven't you already seen it?" Yang Yi asked curiously. Because Lu Weisha said that she likes pandas very much, so I want to put the panda doll that I want to give to Lu Weisha in her room." She smiled sweetly, and her eyes were like crescent moons. "Lu Weisha will be very happy when she walks in." Yang Yi understood and said with a smile, "You want to prepare a surprise for Lu Weisha, right?" Yes. Sisi quickly nodded her little head. She had such a good idea, so how could Yang Yi not agree? At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when the sun was not so hot outside, Yang Yi set off with Shishi. Yang Yi carried big and small bags of things that he wanted to give to Lu Weisha's family. Shishi was also happily holding 2 dolls. One was a single-horned deer with beautiful small horns, and the other was the panda doll that Shishi had mentioned. The little girl bought it from the panda base. It was not very big, and could be considered a mini version of the panda. Shishi bought a lot of them, and they were all gifts for her good friends. How could Tong Tong not follow such a fun thing? The little guy, who was forced by his mother to wear a round sun hat, was also holding a robot that he liked very much. Because he was afraid that he would drop it, he still held his 2 small hands tightly in front of his chest and walked with small steps, humming as he followed behind his sister. It could not be helped. Both of his sister's hands were full, so she could not hold his hand. "Do you want Daddy to carry you?" Yang Yi walked behind the 2 little guys in order to take care of them. He could not help but ask with a smile when he saw that Tong Tong was struggling to keep up. After all, 1 step of his sister's was equivalent to several of his steps. No. Tong Tong's answer was very straightforward, and he did not even pant. However, in order to keep up with his sister, the little guy sometimes had to stop and raise his head strenuously. Only then could he get rid of the sun hat's obstruction and find his sister. Then he laughed happily and jogged after her. Sister. Fortunately, the villa prepared for Lu Weisha's family was not very far away. It was just next to the lakeside greenway where Yang Yi's family often walked. Soon they arrived at their destination. Yang Yi took out the key to open the door. This villa, which had a special purpose, was not very big. It was smaller than Yang Yi's house, and it only had 2 floors. After entering, they saw that the interior was very clean and had all the basic furniture. After all, it had been used to receive relatively high-class guests in the past, and Lans Hao Kai had also asked people to take care of the cleanliness in advance. After going upstairs, Shishi opened the door of the room that she had designated as Lu Weisha's bedroom. She excitedly ran to the bedside table and put down the single-horned deer doll that she was holding in her left hand. Hua Hua lives here. The little girl muttered to herself. Then the panda will be on the bed. Lu Weisha will definitely love to hug it to sleep. Hua Hua was the name of the deer that she had rescued at her grandfather's house. Now Shishi had given it to the single-horned deer doll. As Shishi spoke, she took off her shoes and climbed onto the bed. She placed the panda doll on the pillow in the middle of the bed. After looking at it for a while, she smiled with satisfaction and turned around. Hey little brother, what are you doing? Shishi turned around and saw that Tong Tong had placed his robot on the bedside table next to the single-horned deer. She could not help but cry out in surprise. Tong Tong was shocked by his sister's question. The little fellow actually only wanted to imitate his sister and play with her. Now he looked at his sister in confusion and stood there helplessly. I know, Shishi giggled and said. Little brother, you also want to give sister Lu Weisha a surprise. Tong Tong was really confused by his sister's surprised look. He blinked his big eyes and looked at his sister in confusion. Let me help you, Shishi said enthusiastically. She slid down from the bed and picked up Tong Tong's robot. She walked to the bedside table on the other side. The room's furniture was a bit like a hotel apartment, and carefully placed it next to the table lamp. After Shishi finished placing it, she walked back and looked at it for a while before nodding her head in satisfaction. Yes, it's symmetrical like this. It looks good. Xiao Pai pouted his little mouth, his little face full of confusion. He simply couldn't understand what his sister was doing. Is it fun to move things from here to there? Chapter 1133. When they were about to go back to school to get the student handbook and the final exam results, Lan Xian finally came back. Lan Xian, who had been living in the countryside for a week, was tanned. She used to be a fair and chubby little girl, but now she had become, cough cough, to save some face for Xian air. The first thing Lan Xian did when she came back was to find Shishi. Lan Zhoukai and Wu Jingjing had just arrived home, but before they could pack their luggage, Lan Xian came to Shishi's house with difficulty, carrying a heavy bag of water chestnuts. Shishi, try this. It's super delicious. Hey, my relatives just picked it this morning. You have to eat it quickly. If it's left for too long, it won't taste good. Lan Xian said anxiously when she saw Yang Yi put it on the table in the dining room after taking it for her. Lan Xin was very particular when it came to good food. If it weren't for the worry that it wouldn't taste good if it was left for too long, Lan Xian wouldn't have been so anxious to bring it over for Shishi to try. After all, it was so heavy that it took a lot of effort. It won't taste good if it's left for too long? Shishi asked, puzzled. She felt that it was very strange. Apple, pear, and other fruits, weren't they still edible after being left for too long? Lan Xian nodded her little head vigorously and said seriously, yes. When we were in our hometown, we took a boat to a very big lake to pick these. It's the best when it's just picked, but after it's left, it won't taste good anymore. It will turn black. Speaking of which, Lan Xian still had some regrets. She pouted her little mouth and said, Shishi, you didn't go to play with me. Now it's a little black, but it's okay to eat it quickly. It's just that, Sisi, if you go to my hometown with me, you can eat the most delicious water chestnuts. Shishi looked at her friend enviously. Of course, she wasn't envious of Lan Xian for having fresh water chestnuts to eat. Instead, she was envious of Lan Xian for being able to take a boat to a big lake to play. But my papa and mom are not free. I also want to go and play. Shishi's 2 small hands were tangled in front of her, as she said with grievance. Yang Yi had just turned around. Hearing their conversation, he shook his head and smiled. He didn't agree to let Shishi follow Lan Xian to the countryside to play because of this reason. Lance Hao Kai said that he wanted the children to see the big scene of water caltrip harvesting. Although Lance Hao Kai usually trusted Yang Yi and didn't mind letting him take his daughter around the world, Yang Yi didn't trust Boss Lan. Or more accurately, he didn't trust the villagers in Lance Hao Kai's village. Take a boat to a deep lake to play? Yang Yi didn't want his daughter to take this risk when she was out of his sight. He couldn't follow. If something happened, it would be too late for Yang Yi to rush over. However, Yang Yi didn't say this in front of the children. Even when he told Lance Hao Kai about his worries, he didn't say it directly. Instead, he used a more tactful excuse. Xian Air is so thoughtful, sending the water caltrips over in such a hurry. Yang Yi said with a smile. But the water caltrips are actually not as delicious as stir-fried vegetables. We can stir-fry the water caltrips with chives or use streaky pork to make a very fragrant and delicious water caltrip braised pork with brown sauce. Fatty but not greasy braised pork with brown sauce. Once you bite into it, you'll be filled with the fragrance of meat. Actually, Yang Yi didn't really want the children to eat the water caltrips raw. This was because it was said that raw water caltrips, especially the surface, had parasites, so it was best to cook them before eating. This was also why after he received the water caltrips, he put them on the table in the dining room, and didn't bring them to the coffee table for the little girls to peel and eat. As Yang Yi described the deliciousness of the braised pork with brown sauce, he stole glances at Lan Xian. He was obviously doing this on purpose. Of course, if it's not urgent, we can also make a water caltrip cake. Lan Xian's eyes were shining and her saliva was dripping. Finally, she couldn't hold it in anymore and said loudly, I want to eat, I want to eat, I want to eat, I want to eat red water caltrip braised pork. Papa Yang, let's make red water caltrip braised pork with brown sauce, okay? Stir-frying and whatnot, forget it. Besides, why hadn't she eaten red water caltrip braised pork with brown sauce in her hometown? Someone had stir-fried water caltrip with beef, but it wasn't delicious. Lan Xian was used to eating delicious food made by Papa Yang, so her mouth was already picky. Yang Yi laughed and said, Then Xian Air, you and Shishi can play at home first. This afternoon, we'll have lunch at our house. It was almost lunchtime. Lan Zhou Kai and the others probably just came back and didn't have time to cook. Yang Yi planned to call Lan Zhou Kai and Wu Jingjing over, but this matter didn't require Lan Xian to make the trip. Yang Yi could just call her later. Okay. Lan Xian nodded her head excitedly. The two little girls were playing downstairs. When Murphy saw this, she patted Tong Tong's butt and told him to go play with the two older sisters. She went into the kitchen and stood next to Yang Yi. Is this water caltrip? I've heard of it a few times, but this is the first time I've seen it. Murphy said in amazement, like a curious baby. Really? You haven't seen it before? Yang Yi asked with a smile. He had forgotten that in the end, it was still his fault. Who asked Yang Yi to never buy water chestnuts to eat? In fact, in the market of Jiangcheng, water caltrips were a relatively common ingredient. Murphy didn't care. She picked up a water caltrip and said with a smile, Look at this water caltrip. Doesn't it look a bit like a cow's horn? And it looks especially like the horns of the African buffalo in the animal world. It didn't look like one now, but when it was dried and tanned, it would look even more like one. Yang Yi smiled and said, Are you trying to say that every time a water caltrip is produced, an African buffalo will lose its beloved horn? Please spread the word and let more people know that if there is no trade, there is no harm? Murphy nearly couldn't keep up with Yang Yi's train of thought. She was stunned for a long time before she reacted. She laughed so hard that tears were about to fall. She hammered Yang Yi's arm with her fist and giggled. Wow, how are you so talented? You can even make up something like this. Then you don't know how much the netizens in the previous life were like. Yang Yi was so proud that he even sang the classic, Picking Red Caltrips. The two of us rowed the boat, plucking red caltrips, 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 plucking red caltrips. This song was originally a duet between a man and a woman. Yang Yi pinched his throat and pretended to be a woman for a while, and then sang very boldly. He was like a young gentleman who was going to pick red caltrops with a girl. But under Yang Yi's superb control of singing, it was actually quite good. Yang Yi sang while holding Murphy's waist, who was laughing so hard that she couldn't stand properly. Just like rowing a boat, he rocked. The two of them flirted shamelessly in the kitchen. They didn't know that outside the kitchen, Shishi and Lan Xian had encountered a small problem. Chapter 1134. At this moment in the living room, Shishi and Lan Xian were looking at Tong Tong, who seemed to be confused as well. The story started a few minutes ago. Tong Tong was only 1.5 years old, so he was very forgetful. That day, he accompanied his older sister to walk around the small villa. Then his older sister held his little hand and brought him home. He seemed to have forgotten something. It was also after a few days that little Momo realized that her favorite robot seemed to have disappeared. The robot that could transform and sing was Tong Tong's favorite. The remaining robots were not the one he was looking for today. There was a basket full of robots, cars, and trucks. Some of them could transform, and some of them could make a beeping sound when they were pushed. However, there was no robot that could transform and sing at the same time. Tong Tong stuck his little butt out and buried himself in his pile of toys. After searching for a long time, he still could not find the robot. When he raised his head, Tong Tong's eyes were a little confused, and he even looked like he was doubting life. Thus, the scene at the beginning of the story occurred. Tong Tong ran over to his two older sisters. He held one of Shishi's fingers with one hand and pointed at his pile of toys with the other. He asked for help. "Where's that? Where's that? Where's that?" Shishi and Lan Xian were confused by his words. Tong Tong was dumbfounded. He really did not know how to describe it. The little guy was lacking in vocabulary. He stuttered for a long time, but he still could not say a word. Huawei, what are you talking about? I don't understand," Lan Xian said. The three little guys looked at each other for a while. Tong Tong was so anxious that he was like an ant on a hot pan. He looked at his pile of toys for a while, then raised his head and looked at his older sisters. In the end, Shishi and Lan Xian accompanied Tong Tong to his pile of toys. Tong Tong started rummaging through the toys. Lan Xian and Shishi could only squat at the side and watch curiously. Tong Tong picked up a robot and gestured to Lan Xian. Then he pouted his little mouth and said, "There's nothing, older sister." He wanted to say that his robot was gone, but he just could not express it. However, at this moment, Shishi seemed to understand something. After all, she was his older sister. She raised her eyebrows and pointed at the robot in Tong Tong's arms. She giggled and said, "Tong, little brother, are you looking for a robot?" Xiao Rua nodded hurriedly, then pouted with an aggrieved expression. "Rua wants to play." The next day, Shishi and Lan Xian had to go to school to collect their student handbooks. However, Yang Yi was not the one sending them to school today. Lan Hao Kai was free these few days, so he volunteered to send the two little girls to school. Lan Hao Kai and Yang Yi were the same. Usually, when the children went to school, Yang Yi was the one sending them to school most of the time. However, Lan Hao Kai would send them to school on behalf of Yang Yi if he was not busy with work. However, he did not drive himself. There was a chauffeur in the car. "Shall I send you up? Do you have a parent-teacher conference today?" Lan Hao Kai asked with a smile when they arrived at school. No. However, Lan Xian's reaction was very intense. She yelled, "None of the others' fathers went up with us. They only want the children." From the looks of it, Lan Xian's reaction was like that of a rebellious child. She did not want her parents to be involved in her own affairs. However, that was not the case. Lan Xian was just worried that her father would be caught by the form teacher after he went upstairs. Then he would expose her poor performance. It was like this last year. Teacher Li came to visit and complained to Lan Hao Kai. Lan Xian began a miserable working life. If she did not work hard to earn money, she would not be able to watch TV or eat good food. Lan Xian did not want to be lectured by her father again. Lan Hao Kai, who was originally in high spirits, felt as if he had been splashed with cold water. He could only resentfully stop his footsteps. He sighed, waved his hand at the two girls and said, "Then you two go upstairs by yourselves. Be careful. I'll wait for you at the school gate." She watched as the two young ladies ran happily towards their classmates with laughter, like the wind. Poor Boss Lon could only regretfully return to the car and listen to music while waiting for them to come back. However, Lance Haokai's business was so big that it was impossible for him to be completely idle. After a while, he received a call from one of his subordinates. They had something to ask him. Not long after he put down his phone, he received another call from a business partner. It was nothing important. The two of them were just discussing the arrangements for playing golf this weekend. Lance Haokai's phone calls came one after another. He was so busy that he saw Shishi, Lon Xian, and two other little girls from their class walking out of the school gate. When he finally snapped back to reality, almost an hour had passed. "Bye, little you. Bye, Qianqian." Shishi waved and said goodbye to her and Lon Xian's deskmate with a smile. Then, she and Lon Xian went back to Papa Lan's luxurious MPV. Lance Haokai put away his phone and jumped down to open the door for the two little girls. He asked cheerfully, "How was your final exam?" "Shishi, you didn't forget to write your name this time, did you?" He had not gotten into the car yet, so he did not see the two little girls looking at each other. Two pairs of cute eyes sparkled, communicating with their eyes. After Lance Haokai sat down in the front passenger seat, Shishi said unhappily, "Papa Lon, I didn't forget to write my name, but I didn't do well on the exam." Before Shishi could complain about how she did, Lance Haokai quickly comforted her. "It's okay if you didn't do well on the exam. You just have to work harder next time. Shishi, your grades are usually good and you're a smart child. It's normal for you to perform poorly on an exam, unlike Xian. She didn't do well on the exam because she wasn't smart to begin with, and she didn't study hard. You need to have a little confidence in yourself." However, Lon Xian was not going to let him say that. She shouted, "Papa, who said I didn't do well on the exam? I did really well on the exam this time. I also got 100 in math. And then Teacher Lee said I was still 9th in class." "You did so well." Lance Haokai couldn't believe his ears. It was true. Lon Xian did really well this time. Her total score was actually in the top 10 of the class. This time, it was Shishi's turn to be unhappy. She pouted and said gloomily, "Ugh, Xian, you're so naughty. We agreed to scare your daddy." "So that's what happened." Lance Haokai was stunned for a moment, then he shook his head and laughed. However, even if she failed to scare Papa Lon, wasn't there still Papa Yang? When they got home, Shishi threw herself into her father's arms with a sad expression. She didn't say anything, just sobbing with her head down. "What's wrong? Shishi, what's wrong?" Yang Yi was a little surprised. Lance Haokai also walked in with Lon Xian. Lance Haokai was very cooperative. He sighed but he didn't explain. He just pretended to be very sad. Lon Xian pouted and ran to the sofa. She hugged Papa Yang's arm and said sadly, "Papa Yang, Shishi and I didn't do well on the final exam. Ugh, I want to cry too." Yang Yi opened his mouth. His expression changed as if he wanted to laugh, but he held it back. In the end, it turned into an expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. If you want to act, at least act more realistically. Her crying is full of flaws. It's obvious that she's faking it. Yang Yi complained inwardly. Actually, he was complaining about Lon Xian and her father. When Shishi threw herself into his arms just now, Yang Yi's heart skipped a beat. He thought that something bad was going to happen. However, when he saw Lance Haokai's meaningless performance and Lon Xian's tears, he suddenly understood what was going on. However, Yang Yi hesitated and didn't expose them. He just held back his laughter and deliberately held Shishi and Lon Xian's hands nervously. He said, "Didn't do well? Why didn't you do well?" "Sigh, but it doesn't matter. Shishi, didn't Papa tell you before? If you didn't do well, we shouldn't be discouraged or sad." Sisi couldn't hold it in any longer. The little girl raised her head, her hair a little messy because of the torment. There were no tears in her big eyes, but they were watery as she looked at her father with a smile. She twisted in her father's arms and stuck out her little tongue. Hee, Papa was deceived. I didn't do badly in the exam. Xian Air did super well in the exam, and then I also got the first place. I didn't cry either. Lan Xian also let go of Papa Yang's arm. She raised her head and giggled, showing Papa Yang her face. They seemed to think that their little prank had succeeded, and all of them had smug looks on their faces. Papa, look, I did very well in the exam this time. Teacher Li even praised me. At this time, Cece took out her red student handbook from her small school bag and flipped open the pages with 3 full marks written on them. She nestled in her father's arms obediently and happily pointed them out for him to see. Me too. Teacher Li said that I improved the most. Lan Xian didn't want to be outdone. She showed her student handbook to Papa Yang. Chapter 1135. The 2 young ladies waited and waited, hoping and hoping. Finally, Lu Weisha arrived in front of them on a plane that had traveled halfway across the globe. Yang Yi had secretly speculated that Shi and Lu Weisha had not seen each other for a year. When they met again, would they become more distant? But when he received Lu Weisha at the airport and saw the young lady's behavior, Yang Yi overturned his assumption. Perhaps when they saw Lu Weisha and her parents walking out from the corridor, Shi and Lan Xian were stunned for a moment. But after confirming that it was really her, the 2 young ladies cheered and greeted her. Lu Weisha. Lu Weisha was also pleasantly surprised. She ran over and hugged Shi and Lan Xian. Shi had grown a lot taller this year, but Lu Weisha had also grown taller. Due to genetic factors, she was now 1 or 2 fingers taller than Shi. She was able to hug Shi and Lan Xian. But her personality was not as cheerful as Shishi's. She was still the same after a year. She pursed her lips and smiled shyly. The young ladies chattered away, and there was no sense of distance between them at all. Unlike when Yang Yi greeted David with a more formal handshake, David was more familiar with Chinese culture. They looked very cordial. But in fact, they were far less familiar with each other than when David was working in China, where the 2 of them could chat happily over coffee. Perhaps it was because they often video chatted that their relationship was maintained so well. Lan Xian was the same. Shi would often call her to chat with Lu Weisha. It was worth mentioning that Lu Weisha was not as talented in languages as Shi. After wasting a year, Lu Weisha could not remember how to speak Chinese except for some simple greetings. But it did not matter. Shi was proficient in Swedish. Shi did not find it troublesome at all. She enthusiastically translated for Lan Xian and Lu Weisha. Back in the villa area, David and Lu Weisha's mother, Maria, praised Lan Haokai's arrangement for them. It's so beautiful. This house is very big and comfortable. I think we will have a very good holiday in China. I'm really grateful to Lan and you, Leon. To say that this small villa was very big was actually not true. Lu Weisha's family owned a large house in Sweden. It could be said to be a mansion. Naturally, this small villa could not compare. But David and Maria also understood that China's national conditions were different. After all, they had lived in China before. Wall Motors rented an apartment for David, so compared to that apartment, this small villa reflected its advantages. They did not have to stay in a hotel for a holiday, but stayed in a more luxurious and spacious villa than a hotel. How could David and Maria not be amazed and grateful? Murphy did not follow them to the airport. She stayed in the villa. At this time, she also came over with Tong Tong and some coffee beans prepared by Yang Yi. The adults were downstairs in the living room, drinking coffee and chatting. The children felt a little bored. Shi winked at Lan Xian and whispered to Lu Weisha for a while. After a while, the girls got up secretly and walked upstairs. They thought that their parents would not notice their movements. How was that possible? However, Yang Yi knew that they should be going up to see the surprise that Shi had prepared for Lu Weisha, so he did not stop them. Lu Weisha. At %. On the stairs, Shi said something to Lu Weisha in Swedish. Then she turned her head and said excitedly to Lan Xian. Xian Air. I told Lu Weisha that you and I have prepared a big surprise for her. We are going to take her to see it now. I've already guessed it. Lan Xian chuckled smugly. But at this time, A childish voice came from behind them. Sister, sister. Shishi and Lan Xian heard it. They turned around and looked down from the staircase railing. They found that Tong Tong had followed them. It turned out that the little guy did not like to play with his parents. Those adults were very bored, so he followed his sister's footsteps. However, Tong Tong was small and had short legs. He climbed the stairs very slowly. After he climbed 2 steps, he looked up and saw that his sisters had already passed by the corner of the stairs. How could Tong Tong not be anxious? Why didn't my sisters wait for me? Xiaobai's little mouth pouted in grievance. Fortunately, little Momo's anxious cry still had an effect. Cece glanced downstairs, then ran downstairs in 3 steps, took her brother's hand, and pulled him up together. Lu Weisha, my brother wants to play with us too. Do you remember him? His name is Momo. Shishi introduced him enthusiastically. Shishi, I remember him. He is your brother. He was so small back then, but he is all grown up now. Lu Weisha's eyes lit up. She ran over happily and held Tong Tong's other hand as she spoke to Shishi. Hee, that's right. My brother is already 1.5 years old. He is taller now, and let me tell you, he is so heavy that I can't even carry him. Shishi pointed at Tong Tong as if she was showing off her baby. Her clear and bright eyes were filled with smiles as she spoke. Tong Tong did not understand what his sisters were talking about. He stood there in a daze, but his eyes were wide open as he stared straight at Lu Weisha. In the little fellow's limited memories, he had never seen a little big sister who looked like this. Although her blonde hair was not as smooth as his sister's long black hair, her curly hair gave off a languid and charming feeling. Her fair skin was even more radiant than Sister Xian Air's tan skin. It was as if her body was emitting a faint fluorescent light. Of course, Tong Tong did not think too much about it. He simply felt that this sister's hair was very beautiful. It might be as fragrant as mom's. He also felt that this sister's appearance was very beautiful. Her 3-dimensional nose and face would leave a deep impression on Tong Tong. What attracted Tong Tong the most was Sister Lu Weisha's eyes. They were not black, but blue. They were as blue as the sky. In Tong Tong's mind, only that pair of blue eyes was left. He was led by his sister, but he kept staring at Sister Lu Weisha. It was as if he wanted to find an answer from Sister Lu Weisha. When they reached the room and heard Lu Weisha's exclamation, and Shishi's and Lan Xian's bell-like laughter, Tong Tong finally regained his senses. Shishi introduced the items to Lu Weisha. Of course, she also took the trouble to translate for Lan Xian, so that Lan Xian could also participate. I told Lu Weisha, these are all for her. This panda and deer are gifts from me, and this little doll is a gift from you, Xian Air. Shishi was referring to the Barbie doll that was placed on the bedside table, where Tong Tong had placed the robot. Tong Tong was in a hurry to get the robot back, so Shishi accompanied him to the villa to get it back. Lan Xian volunteered to fill the hole. She gave the Barbie doll that her mother, Wu Jingjing, bought for her when she went overseas to play and gave it to Lu Weisha. You have to tell Lu Weisha that this little doll looks like her. That's why I gave it to her. Lan Xian said excitedly. Wasn't that right? They were both blonde and blue-eyed dolls. Okay. Shishi told Lu Weisha. Lu Weisha looked at Lan Xian in surprise. She ran over gratefully and gave Lan Xian a hug. At this time, Shishi started talking to Lu Weisha. Lu Weisha listened in amazement for a long time. Then, she looked at Tong Tong and seemed to find it very interesting. She pursed her lips and giggled. Tong Tong was puzzled by her stare. He just stood by the side and watched his sisters chat. But soon, Tong Tong knew the answer to his question. Shishi eagerly translated for Lan Xian. I just told Lu Weisha that it used to be my younger brother's robot. It could transform and sing. I thought he was going to give it to Lu Weisha, but later I found out that wasn't the case. Luckily, Xian Air came back and gave Lu Weisha such a beautiful doll. Lan Xian waved her hand generously and said proudly, Of course, because I'm also Lu Weisha's good friend. Tong Tong looked thoughtfully at his sisters chatting. Later, the 3 of them climbed onto the bed and sat on the blanket. They played with the 3 dolls in full swing. I'm so envious. Chapter 1136. Papa, Why do we have to go home and let Lu Weisha go to sleep? After sitting in the small villa for a while, Yang Yi and Murphy left with the 3 children. Shishi was a little reluctant, because she had just met her friends and hadn't had enough fun yet. Although the little girl left with her father obediently, she still couldn't figure it out on the way, so she asked unhappily, "Because we have to deal with jet lag." Yang Yi held Tong Tong in his left hand and Shishi's hand in his right. He smiled and said, "Lu Weisha's family just came to China and crossed 7 time zones. Although it's only 10 o'clock now, it's still 3 or 4 o'clock in the middle of the night where they live. It's just the right time to sleep." Ah. Not only Shishi, but Lan Xian, who was walking with Shishi, was also very confused. They almost simultaneously looked over with confused eyes. "Your father is making it too complicated." Murphy saw that Yang Yi's attempt to show off his knowledge was thwarted, so she couldn't help but laugh and say, "It's just that they're very tired from the flight and need to sleep. Shishi, it's just like when we came back from Grandpa's house. We also need to sleep." "I don't need to sleep when I'm on the plane. I've already slept on the plane," Lan Xian shouted, puffing out her small chest. "That's still a little different. They've been on this plane for a long time, and they have to change planes in the middle. It's very tiring." Yang Yi also learned to be smart and explained simply, "Don't worry, we'll invite Lu Weisha and her parents over for lunch at noon." It was useless to say so much before, so this sentence was very much in line with Shishi's wishes. Hearing that Lu Weisha could come to play again at noon, which was less than 2 hours later, Shishi clapped her hands happily and said, Okay. "What about me? What about me?" Lan Xian asked anxiously. "Papa Yang, can I join you for dinner? I also want to play with Lu Weisha." You can't. Your family has already cooked rice." Yang Yi was very bad, deliberately teasing Lan Xian. "Well, I don't want to eat at home." Lan Xian was immediately unwilling. How could she leave herself alone? The little girl pouted and twisted her round waist. Suddenly she had an idea. Her eyes lit up and she said, "I know. Daddy Yang, everyone can come to our house for dinner. Then Papa Yang can also come to our house to cook." Oh, what a good plan. Lan Xian's cleverness made everyone laugh. Yang Yi helplessly rubbed Lan Xian's head and smiled. "All right, I'm afraid of you. Come to our house for lunch." After returning home, Tong Tong excitedly ran to his toy basket in the living room. He found his favorite robot among the broken mechanical arms. Sister. Tong Tong hugged the robot and ran to the sofa. He pulled his sister's hand and looked at her expectantly. Shishi, who was watching TV with Lan Xian, did not know what he wanted to say. She could only follow his hand gesture and jump off the sofa. Who would have thought that Xiao Tianyu was so excited that she pulled her sister's hand and walked out? When Sisi saw this, she hurriedly pulled little Hua Cheng and said, "No, you can't go outside to play. Papa said that you can't go outside to play now. Papa will be angry." Murphy heard the noise and walked over from the side hall. She picked up Tong Tong and asked with a smile, "Where are you going? You even dragged your sister to do bad things. Your sister is so obedient, so you have to be obedient too." But little rascal didn't mean that at all. He couldn't express himself, so he pointed outside and looked at his mother with a serious look in his eyes. His mouth muttered a lot of words. At this time, Lan Xian felt that she had guessed the answer correctly. She ran over and shouted, "I know. You can't let Tong Tong go outside to play. Look at him holding this toy. He went outside to play and lost it again. Last time he lost it, so Shishi and I went to look for it." Sisi quickly nodded and complained, "That's right. Little brother forgot where he put it." "I know about it. Dad told me about it." Murphy smiled and shook her head. She comforted Tong Tong and said softly, "The toy is not important. Safety first." Therefore, Tong Tong's request was misunderstood. Since Lu Weisha's family arrived late at noon, Tong Tong, who usually went to bed on time, could not resist the thick pajamas and missed the opportunity. When he saw the blue-eyed girl again, it was already the next morning. Early in the morning, Lu Weisha, who had recovered from the jet lag, ran over to play with Shishi. "Lu Weisha, how about we go to the publishing house today?" Yang Yi smiled and suggested. I remember your father saying that you like reading very much. When we get there, there will be a lot of good books, and many of them have been translated into English. You can go and take a look and see if there are many children's books that you like. Publishing house? Is it a bookstore? Lu Weisha asked innocently. No, a publishing house is not a bookstore. She explained to her friend enthusiastically. It is much more fun than a bookstore. There are many dolls and books. I like it very much. Cici was right. Ever since the Sahara Publishing House became a benchmark in the field of children's literature publishing, it had also gathered a group of children's literature authors and professional editors. Gradually, its market point was biased towards children's literature. Sahara Publishing House often held salon activities at the publishing house or held reader meetings for its authors. Sahara Publishing House had also been redesigned and renovated. The overall decoration style had become full of children's interest. This was also why Yang Yi felt that the publishing house was more worth it for him to take the children to play instead of spending time in bustling shopping malls and tourist attractions. Going out to play was naturally a very happy thing. Tong Tong was so happy that he almost forgot about his business. He beamed with joy as he followed his mother and watched her pack some of the necessary travel equipment. When they were about to leave the house, the little boy let his sister hold his hand. Wearing brand new shoes, he grinned proudly and revealed a few cute little teeth as he walked into the courtyard. At this moment he saw Lu Weisha. After seeing her blue eyes a few more times, they were not as attractive as before. However, they had awakened Tong Tong's long-lost obsession. Fortunately, his mother had not come out yet. Tong Tong let go of his sister's hand, turned around, and went back into the house to take out his robot. Why do we have to take it with us these few days? Murphy muttered in confusion as she followed Tong Tong out. However, Murphy did not let Tong Tong leave the toy at home. It was only a small robot, so it was fine to take it with him. At this moment, the girls were crowded around Yang Yi's MPV nanny van, and were excitedly dividing the seats. Listen to me. It's more comfortable to sit in the middle. Lan Xian shouted loudly as she shared her experience with her friends. She was more sensitive. She waved her hand and said anxiously, "No, only 2 people can sit in the middle. There won't be any seats for Sister Lu Weisha. Xian, can the 3 of us sit in the back together?" "That's fine too." Lan Xian thought about it and realized that it made sense. She nodded her head in agreement. Thus, when Tong Tong followed his mother into the car, his sisters were all crowded in the 3rd row. They were chatting and laughing happily from time to time. Tong Tong stood in the aisle between the 2nd row and the 1st row and looked at his sisters in a daze. "Sit in the safety seat." Murphy wanted to carry the little fellow, but she was rejected. Tong Tong finally remembered his mission. He pushed his mother's hand away and squeezed through the aisle in the middle of the 2nd row. His eyes were bright as he reached out his little hand that was holding the robot towards Lu Weisha. At first, Lu Weisha didn't notice it and just took it subconsciously. Then she looked at Xiao Rua in surprise. "And my little brother gave his robot to you?" She said to Lu Weisha in surprise. She found it unbelievable. "I don't know." Lu Weisha looked at Tong Tong worriedly and asked Shi, But will your little brother cry? He seems to like this robot a lot." However, after Shi and Murphy asked a few times, Tong Tong did not have any intention of taking the robot back. He only patted the robot in Lu Weisha's hand and turned his head around happily. It was as though he was worried that Lu Weisha would push the robot back. "It seems like he gave it to you temporarily. Lu Weisha, you can hold on to it first," Murphy said to Lu Weisha in English, amused. Lu Weisha fiddled with the robot for a while. When she heard Murphy's words, she whispered a few words in embarrassment. "Hua, Sister Lu Weisha wants to thank you for the toy. She likes it a lot." Murphy smiled and translated to Tong Tong, who had just been carried to the child safety seat by his father. It was unknown if Tong Tong understood, but his expression was very happy. He sat on the high child safety seat and kicked his little legs. Murphy was amused when she saw the little guy get what he wanted. She rolled her eyes and waited for the car to drive off. Then, she sneaked up to Tong Tong and whispered in his ear, "You are so stupid. Why don't you learn from your father, who gives a girl a robot? Next time, you should give her something nice. Even if you secretly give your sister's doll to a female classmate, it's fine. Murphy, who was pretending that her son did not understand, did not know that her son's situation was described by a special term in Yang Yi's previous life, iron straight man. Chapter 1137. Lily, do you want to watch this movie? In an ordinary female dormitory in Jiangxing Media University, Heemin pulled her chair and made a squeaking sound as she moved to Chow Yaoli's side. She excitedly showed her phone to her. Frozen? I know. It's Yang Yi's new movie. Chow Yaoli combed her messy long bangs with her fingers and laughed. But isn't this an animated movie? It's for the kids. Why do you want to watch it? Heemin was about to speak when Chow Yaoli shook her fair finger and said with a smile, Don't tell me you went to the cinema just to listen to the song. I heard that the theme song is an English single released by Murphy. Why don't you just buy it and listen to it online? Hey, who said I just wanted to listen to the song? Heemin pulled Chow Yaoli's hand unwillingly and said, This movie is very good. It has high ratings online. Moreover, Xiaoya from the dormitory next door went to watch the premiere with her boyfriend in the middle of the night 2 days ago. She said that even the adults were fascinated by it and wanted to watch it again when they were free. Is it really that good? Chow Yaoli looked at Heemin in surprise. She thought that she was already past the age of watching animated movies. If she wanted to watch movies, she should watch literary films. Hey, I don't want to explain to you. I'm going to buy tickets in the Sahara Desert now. Let's go and have a look. Heemin said excitedly. I just took a look. The cinemas in the city are almost full. It's impossible to buy tickets now. Only the cinemas in our university town have many tickets. Now that the university students were on vacation, only Heemin and Chow Yaoli were left in the university town, not derogatory. Most people were not like Heemin and Chow Yaoli, who had been recommended for postgraduate studies. Everyone was busy reading books in the library and had no time to watch a movie. Heemin did as she said. She quickly bought the tickets. In the afternoon, the two well-dressed girls happily went to the cinema in the university town together. In fact, it was in the commercial street outside the main entrance of the Media University of Jiangxing. They walked hand in hand and arrived in a few steps. Sure enough, the cinema in the university town was deserted. When Chow Yaoli and Heemin arrived, there were only a few people in the huge hall. Other than them and the two front desk staff who were selling tickets, popcorn, drinks, and dolls, there was only a couple sitting by the side, waiting for the movie to start. As the movie started at 4 o'clock, they still had to wait for a while. Heemin and Chow Yaoli held their tickets, carried their bags, and sat by the side. The mischievous Heemin was still restless when she sat down. She stretched out her finger and poked Chow Yaoli's arm. Then she pouted her lips and signaled to her to look at the couple. Chow Yaoli was about to say something, but Heemin quickly signaled her to stop and shook her mobile phone. So the two of them sat together and kept playing with their mobile phones. They used WeChat to whisper to each other. Damn girl, you're in love, aren't you? Hurry up and find a boyfriend. Chow Yaoli sent a naughty emoji at the end. No, Lily, look, where is that man's hand? Heemin typed, beaming with joy, as if she was the one who was talking. Where is he? Isn't he just hugging his girlfriend? What's so strange about that? You're looking at his right hand. Look at his left hand. Heemin typed while desperately winking at Chow Yaoli. Wow, I just saw him putting his hand on his girlfriend's leg. Now I don't know where his hand is. I saw it. Chow Yaoli's cheeks were slightly red. Lily, guess where it's reaching? Isn't there a poem that says so? In the quiet path of the water, the peach blossoms are thick with dew. Looking for the missing hand, the deer in the depths of the forest. Chow Yaoli pursed his lips and typed rapidly on the screen with his fingers. After a while, a line of text was sent. Heemin's eyes immediately widened, and she almost spat out the water she was drinking. She put down the drink bottle and quickly typed, OOOOF*CK. You're still the dirtiest, Lily. No wonder everyone says that you're cold on the outside, but passionate on the inside. Just as the two girls were laughing and gossiping, there was a sudden commotion outside the cinema. Of course, it was not because someone was causing trouble, but because of the childish voices. It was obvious that a group of children were swarming over. Shishi, is she up there? I don't know either. I want to ask Uncle Xiaogua. Is she up there? Yes, Chi-Chi. I've already asked Uncle Xiaogua about this. Then let's go up. Xionaire, I want to compete with you to see who can run up there first. I don't want to compete with you, Chen Shiyin. You can compete with Lu Weisha and Shishi. Hehe. Xiu Yu, Sister Xiaowei, hurry up and come up too. Shishi, you can't shout. The cinema is a public place, and you can't be a bad influence on others. You have to take the lead and tell everyone not to make noise and to speak softly. A familiar male voice was lecturing the children. At first, He Yimin and Chao Yali heard the excited voices of the children, and thought that they were just the children of the university's staff who came to watch a movie. However, when they turned around, they were stunned. Putting aside the large group of children, although there were unfamiliar faces among the adults with the children, the ones who were surrounded by the children were Yang Yi and Murphy. There were also Yang Huan and Guazi who were chatting and laughing on the side. He Yimin and Chao Yali were very familiar with these few people. Even though they didn't really watch the Limit Challenge, they naturally knew about Yang Huan and Guazi because of Yang Yi. Moreover, Yang Huan and Guazi were their schoolmates. How could they not have heard of such famous stars in the same or lower grade in their school? Wait a minute, why are they here? Are they here to watch a movie too? That's right, Yang Yi had brought the children here to watch a movie. In the past, Yang Yi had promised that he would let Shishi invite her friends to watch the blockbuster movie Frozen. Hence, he had organized a small movie-watching activity today. He had asked Cici to gather all her friends and bring them to the cinema near Jiangqing Media University to watch a movie together. It was worth mentioning that Lu Weisha had come at the right time. Frozen was officially released a few days after her arrival. Yang Yi had been busy for the first 2 days of the movie's release. He had to attend the premiere and accept interviews from the reporters, etc. Hence, the movie was scheduled for that day. He had also found out from Guazi that there were fewer people in the cinema in the university town. Hence, he didn't have to worry about too many fans crowding around the cinema and affecting the children's movie viewing experience. However, they didn't expect that there would be only 4 guests in the entire cinema. 2 of them were definitely his and Murphy's diehard fans. He Yimin and Chao Yali were excited when they saw them. Their WeChat conversations were also flooding the screen. Wow, isn't that Yang Yi? Yeah, and Murphy too. I'm so excited. Lily, do you think we should ask them for autographs? I don't think so. They are taking care of their children. Wouldn't it be embarrassing to disturb them? Chao Yali was a well-mannered true fan. If it weren't for a few parents, I would have thought that Yang Yi and Murphy had so many children. Oof, do you think Murphy is a pig? How could she have so many children? Hehe, oh yeah, Lily, look at that girl. The girl standing with Guazi. Who is that girl? She is holding hands with Guazi. She should be his girlfriend. They are quite close. Isn't Guazi's girlfriend Yang Huan? Chao Yali wasn't as gossipy as He Yimin, so he asked foolishly. No, they have clarified it countless times. However, this is the first time I've seen Guazi's girlfriend. She is quite pretty, but her skin is a little dark. She might be from our university. Their temperaments are similar. If there's such a thing as temperament? Of course. Then Lily, can you teach me? Is that couple who saw the deer for the first time in Linshin from our university? Hehe, I won't teach you. Soon, Chao Yali sent another message. Because I don't know either. The 2 of them joked around. Chapter 1138. Not to mention the attention of the 2 passerby girls, the 9 children, including Tong Tong, gathered together was enough to build a food market. After all, it was rare for them to come out and play together. Even Yang Luoqi and Yu Xiaowei, who were usually quiet and shy, had joyful smiles on their faces today. No matter how quiet they were now working hard and actively joining in the conversation with everyone. It was worth mentioning that because Lu Weisha was there, their conversation was a mix of Chinese and English. Shishi and Yang Luoqi's English was the best. Yang Luoqi had been learning English from her father, who was a university English teacher, since she was young. She also often had supplementary lessons, so she could communicate normally in English. Lan Xian, Chen Shiyun, and Nan Zhaoyu's spoken English was also good. After all, when they were in kindergarten last year, they often spoke English with Lu Weisha. Now they could even speak simple conversations. Lu Xiaoyu and Yu Xiaowei were a little more difficult. Even Yu Xiaowei had not reached the level of speaking English. However, they still had Shishi to rely on. Lu Xiaoyu and Yu Xiaowei gathered around Shishi. They listened hard and asked Shishi how to say certain things. Then they bravely went to communicate with Lu Weisha. This process was painful and troublesome, but communication was full of fun. Under the enthusiasm of Shishi, the two girls also spoke English with a strange accent. Not only did they not seem out of place, but their laughter never stopped between them. Don't underestimate these children's language learning ability. At this age, it was the best time to learn something, especially a foreign language. As long as they dared to speak and worked hard to learn, the speed at which they mastered spoken English was probably faster than the speed at which they learned written English in class. This was also why the other parents were reluctant to interrupt the children's chatter before entering the cinema. Yang Luoqi's mother, Wu Yu Chenshiyun's father, Chen Guoqiang, Lu Xiaoyu's mother, etc. They were all well aware of this. Not to mention stopping them, they couldn't wait for their children to speak more with this foreign girl. What was interesting was that even little Momo, who couldn't speak fluently and couldn't understand what they were saying, was excitedly squeezed in between his sisters. Although his small stature couldn't reach his sister's line of sight, he still had a sense of participation by looking left and right with his small head. However, after entering the cinema, Yang Yi still had to stand up and maintain order. He couldn't let the children disturb the other guests. Fortunately, he still had a say in this group of children. Or rather, these children liked him very much and were willing to listen to him. Yang Yi stood in front of the group of children who were standing in a row and said softly, "We're in the cinema, so we have to be quiet. We can't speak loudly because this is a public place. If we speak too loudly and disturb others, the security uncle will drive us all out and not let us watch the movie." This was a very scary threat. They all wanted to watch the movie today. If they couldn't watch it, wouldn't it be a disaster? Shishi was very supportive. She looked left and right nervously, as if to see if her friends were speaking. Then she lowered her voice and translated her father's words to Lu Weisha in English. "My papa said that we can't speak loudly. We'll be arrested by the security uncle." Lu Weisha also reacted at this time. She quickly explained to Shishi. In fact, her English was a little bit messy, so she simply changed to Swedish. "I know, we're like this in Sweden too. We can't disturb others." Shishi seemed to feel that her friend's voice was a little too loud. She quickly raised a finger and looked at Lu Weisha nervously. Lu Weisha quickly covered her mouth and shrank beside Shishi. The two girls looked at each other and giggled with their eyes. Yang Yi also took advantage of the time when they were waiting for the movie to start. He took the children to a slightly remote place on the stairs and held a small Q&A with them. At the same time, he taught them some civilized behavior in the cinema. "Next, I'll ask some small questions. Let's see if you can answer them, okay? Whoever raises their hand first will be the one to answer. There's no penalty for answering wrong, but there's a prize for answering right." "What's the prize?" "A tong-tong kettle." Yang Yi smiled and asked Murphy to bring over a tong-tong kettle to show the children. Actually, there was nothing special about this kettle. You just had to press a button to open the lid. And there was a straw that you could drink from. It was the same style and function as the ordinary kettles that the children used to drink from. The only difference was that it had a blue plastic base, and there was a white circle printed on the kettle. On the circle, there was a picture of Tong Tong opening its small branches and cheering. Not only that, but it and the other Princess Elsa printed thermos flasks could already be bought on the Sahara Online Mall as a peripheral product of the Frozen animated movie. Yang Yi suddenly came up with the idea of using it as a small prize to motivate the children, and it had a good effect. When Chen Shiyun and the others saw Tong Tong, they were all excited. In order to show off in front of Yang Yi, they pulled their little friends aside and excitedly whispered a few words. Then they quickly stood back, puffed out their little chests, and held their little hands in front of them, ready to raise their hands to answer at any time. Pay attention when we answer questions, you can only raise your hands. You can't say me. Yang Yi demonstrated vividly, making the children giggle. Uncle Yang will be watching you. Whoever raises their hand first will be the one to answer. I guarantee that it's fair. Okay. The girls nodded obediently. Okay, now for the first question. Before Yang Yi finished speaking, he saw the children's faces tensed up nervously. Even Shi, who already had the kettle, opened her beautiful big eyes to participate in the game. Only Tong Tong did not know what his sisters were playing. He squeezed in between his sisters with a confused look on his face. He stuck in front of Shi and behind Lu Xiaoyu, forming a row by himself. Are they playing a game of standing in a row? The little boy looked around in confusion. Yang Yi did not stop and asked the first question. Can we play with our phones while watching a movie in the theater? The group of children raised their little hands in unison. However, there were also some who were too excited, such as Nan Zhaoyu. He raised his hand and tried to squeeze forward, saying, "No. Oh, that's not right. I was the first one to raise my hand." Shi pouted unhappily and said to her father, "That's right, Nan Zhaoyu. You can't do this next time. You have to wait until Uncle calls your name. You can only answer when your name is called." Yang Yi smiled and rubbed Nan Zhaoyu's little head and said. Nan Zhaoyu nodded his head in shame. With this mistake as an example, the children knew what to do. Actually, Nan Zhaoyu was right. We can't play with our phones while watching a movie. However, we can answer this question again. Who can tell Uncle why we can't? Yang Yi asked with a smile. However, this question was a bit difficult. There were not many people who wanted to answer it. Only two girls, Yang Luoqi and Shi, rushed to raise their hands. Chi first. Yang Yi called her name. Yang Luoqi opened her little mouth, but found that she could not answer. An embarrassed expression appeared on her little face. She also subconsciously rushed to answer. She had not thought of an answer yet. What should she do? Chapter 1139. Actually, Chao Yaoli and He Yimin were secretly worried when the kids appeared. They were afraid that the kids would turn the entire theater upside down. But to their surprise, after Yang Yi and his team appeared, the row of kids obediently followed Yang Yi to a corner. Although there were voices and laughter, the decibel level was not high. It could not even be compared to the sound of the movie's promotional video coming from the LCD advertising screen in the theater. It was at a level that everyone could accept and did not find annoying. These kids are so well-mannered, He Yimin said to Chao Yaoli on WeChat in surprise. It's mainly because of Yang Yi's good management. Chao Yaoli replied. That's true. There's an article on the internet. I forgot where I saw it. It said that Yang Yi is especially good at raising children. She is very good. Although she doesn't appear in front of the media, there's news that Shi's grades are very good in school. This is the so-called, there are no naughty kids, only naughty parents who don't care about their children. I like such well-mannered people, Chao Yaoli said in a genteel manner. Haha, let me tell you. I was worried that they were talking too loudly just now, but now I'm very curious. I really want to know what game they are playing. They weren't playing any game. It was just a simple quiz competition. Then a cute little girl was caught trying to answer, but she didn't have a good answer. Yang Luoqi stuttered for a while, but because she was getting more and more nervous, her mind went blank. She didn't know how to answer. Her face was red, and she stood there at a loss. Yang Yi couldn't bear to see her like this. He was about to help the little girl. But at this time, Yang Luoqi's friends saw the situation and enthusiastically extended a helping hand. Chi, you said that because we are watching a movie, we can't look at our phones. Chen Shiyin whispered. Yes. Nan Zhaoyu quickly nodded. Shi blinked her eyes and came over from behind. She enthusiastically whispered to Yang Luoqi, because it's dark in the movie. You can't look at your phone when it's dark. Papa said that if you look at your phone with the lights off, you'll hurt your eyes. Several of Yang Luoqi's friends gave her ideas. Yang Yi was a little touched by their enthusiasm to help. Finally, After being prompted by her friends, young Luochi gave the answer shyly. However, even with the wisdom of so many stinking cobblers, Yang Yi still didn't get the main point right. It was just that Yang Yi's questions weren't meant to make things difficult for these kids. So he smiled and said, Chi-Chi is right, and you all said it very well too. In order to protect our eyes, we can't read books or use our phones or watch TV in the dark. But I would like to add that you all have to remember that you can't look at your phone in the cinema, because if you look at your phone, it will affect other people watching the movie. Sometimes it's because of the light from your phone, and sometimes it's because of the sound from your phone. For example, if we are watching a movie and the movie is very exciting, and an uncle's phone suddenly rings in front of us, and he makes a call there, will we be affected? Won't we be unable to hear the sound of the movie? Don't you all agree? Yang Yi talked a lot, but the kids didn't feel annoyed at all. They listened thoughtfully and nodded seriously. When Yang Yi simply translated to Lu Weisha in Swedish, Chen Shiyun couldn't help but mutter and whisper to her friends about her experience. Shishi, let me tell you, I'm super unhappy. Because when I'm watching TV, my dad sometimes calls, and it affects me watching cartoons. Then Uncle Chen can't play with his phone. Shishi agreed with her friends with a sense of justice. Isn't that right? Chen Shiyun pouted. After Yang Yi finished explaining, under Yang Luochi's expectant gaze, he smiled and said, although Chi-Chi didn't answer the question on her own this time, it's all my fault for not explaining the rules clearly just now. Therefore, the reward for answering this question should still be given to Chi-Chi. Although Yang Yi said that he didn't have a ready-made Sprite bottle to give her, and that he would give it to her after the movie, Yang Luochi was still very happy. She giggled and turned around to hug Shishi and the others, sharing her joy with them. Of course, the other friends could only look at her enviously, including Lu Weisha. They were all eagerly waiting for Yang Yi to ask the next question. Before we ask the next question, let's talk about the rules again. You have to answer the question on your own. If you can't answer the question after raising your hand, you can't ask for the opinions of other children. Yang Yi made it clear to the children this time. Suddenly, Nan Xiaoyu and Lan Xian's little faces revealed regretful expressions. They seemed to have wanted to learn from Yang Luochi and take advantage of the loophole. After a few rounds of questions, Yang Luochi, Shishi, Yu Xiaowei, and a few other girls who reacted faster had already received their rewards. Lu Weisha also couldn't compete with the other children because of the language barrier. Yang Yi asked her a question alone, and Lu Weisha answered it, so she also received a reward. Now they couldn't continue to participate in the small competition, so they could only stand aside and watch. At this time, Ding Xiang and Guizi came over with a few buckets of popcorn. In fact, Yang Yi had noticed that Ding Xiang was more attentive. Although she had gradually gotten used to working for Yang Yi as a manager and organizer of the Public Welfare Foundation in the rural areas of the Sahara, she still didn't put on airs. Like the waitress Ding Xiang, she carefully helped Yang Yi, Guizi, and other uncouth people deal with some details. It was just like buying popcorn and drinks. Even when they were about to enter the theater to watch the movie, the children would still clamor to buy them. However, Ding Xiang had already thought of this in advance. She brought Guizi with her to the front desk to buy snacks and drinks for everyone. Behind them, Yang Huan was also helping. She asked the waiter to lend her a basket, so that she could carry it to give out drinks to the children. Seeing that there was food and that Shishi and the others had already gotten it, Lan Xian, who was standing in the crowd waiting for an answer, became anxious. She jumped up and down and asked excitedly, Shishi, leave some for me. Don't finish it all. Xianer, don't worry. Ding Xiang couldn't help but chuckle and say, I'll give it to you after you answer the questions. 1 bucket per person. Wow. Do you have any cool potatoes? I want some cool potatoes, and I also want some popcorn. The cool potato and onion flavor is super delicious. Lan Xian begged as she looked at Ding Xiang with her big, watery eyes. Cool potato? I don't think there's any here. I'll ask around for you. Ding Xiang shook her head with a smile. Lan Xian was even more motivated now that there was food to eat. She stood there eagerly, ready to snatch the chance to answer the question. Yang Yi saw this and immediately had an idea. He smiled and said, Since there's popcorn to eat, let's ask a question about popcorn, okay? Lon Xian's eyes lit up and she nodded excitedly. Listen carefully. Yang Yi said, we can eat popcorn when we watch a movie, but after the movie, what should we do with the popcorn in the paper bucket? After the questions were asked, the children began to raise their hands to answer. As expected, Lon Xian was the first to answer. She excitedly puffed out her little chest and raised her chubby little hands high. Xian Air is the first. You say it. Yang Yi smiled. We can take the popcorn home and continue to eat, Lon Xian said excitedly. Yang Yi was stunned. This little girl didn't play by the rules. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, but what if you've already finished the popcorn? Lon Xian pouted and said, but that's the second question. Yang Yi was defeated by her. He was about to organize his words, but at this time, Lon Xian waved her hand generously and said casually, hee, but I know how to answer this question too. I'll put the popcorn in the paper bucket in the trash can. There's a trash can in the movie theater. I know all about it. I've eaten it with my dad before, not watched a movie. Okay. Xian Air, you've made everyone look at you differently today. When Yang Yi heard Lon Xian's answer, although he felt that Lon Xian's naughty words were really asking for a spanking, but he was still infected by Lon Xian's cheerful smile. He couldn't help but reach out and rub Lon Xian's little head. He smiled and said, okay, you answered this question very well. You can go to the side and wait to receive the prize with Shi. Yay! Lon Xian jumped up in joy. Her chubby little body actually gave off the feeling of being as light as a swallow. Xian Air, you're also super awesome. Shi cheered for her little friend. However, Lon Xian didn't have time to hug Shi. She looked around in high spirits and said, hey Sister Ding Xiang, I want to eat cool potatoes. Chapter 1140. Actually, they did not have to wait too long before the movie theater informed them to enter. Yang Yi hurriedly asked Nan Zhaoyu, who was at the back of the line, a very simple question. Then he smiled and waved his hand, gesturing for the children to get ready to enter. It was time to watch the movie. The little guys couldn't wait to line up at the front of the line, each holding a paper bucket of popcorn, eating it while talking excitedly with their little friends around them, or exuberantly exchanging glances with them. Their parents helped to hold their drinks. After all, their small hands could not hold so many things. Not to mention Xiaorua, he could only eat and drink with his sisters. The little guy followed Shi and Lon Xian to the front of the line. Shi was followed by Yu Xiaowei and Lu Weisha. It was worth mentioning that because their father forbade them from letting Tong Tong eat popcorn, Tong Tong could not count on his sister. He could only look at Sister Lon Xian and wait for her to give him a cool potato. Popcorn was easy to choke on, and Tong Tong was too small to eat. However, cool potato was fine. It was so long and thick, and it was fluffy and crispy. Tong Tong could eat it without a problem. Lon Xian stretched the paper bucket in front of Tong Tong's face. Tong Tong beamed with joy as he happily grabbed 2 fries from Sister Xian Air. He held one in each hand and started to gnaw on it while drooling. Lon Xian's mouth did not stop moving. She also ate along with Tong Tong. Before the movie started, there were only half of the fries left in her paper bucket. She did not eat so quickly. She was busy talking. Just a moment ago, Shi was still happily whispering to Lu Weisha and Yu Xiaowei. They were all very busy. It wasn't easy for her to stop and wait for her father to check her tickets. Now her big, crystal-like eyes fell on her younger brother, who was happily eating French fries with Lon Xian, and she finally came to her senses. The little girl generously stretched her paper bucket in front of Lon Xian and giggled. Xian Air, since you gave your cool potato to my little brother, I'll give my popcorn to you too. She might have been influenced by her father for a long time. Perhaps, in her heart, she felt that Tong Tong was under her protection, so they should share the joys and sorrows together. However, Lon Xian unexpectedly waved her hand and refused. She wiped her mouth a little proudly and said to Shi, no need hee. Papa Yang just told me that Sister Ding Xiang bought an extra set of popcorn for Tong Tong. Then I can eat Tong Tong's popcorn too. The two little girls chatted happily. However, Shishi inadvertently raised her head and saw that two very good-looking older sisters, who had already walked past the ticket check, were standing not far from the entrance of the inner hall. They were sizing them up with interest. Shishi blinked her big eyes and looked at them in a daze. In the end, the two older sisters covered their mouths and laughed. They gathered together and whispered to each other. At this time, the little girl came to her senses. She looked a little shy. She pursed her lips and ran to her father with a faint smile. "Papa, Papa." Shishi tugged at her father's clothes. Yang Yi was still watching Ding Xiang check the tickets. They had more people. Ding Xiang took out a large stack of movie tickets from her bag, and the ticket checker still had to tear it up for a while. In fact, other people also recognized Yang Yi and the others. They were afraid of troubling Yang Yi and causing unnecessary public opinion. So they said that they didn't care and let Yang Yi and the others go in to watch the movie. However, Yang Yi considered that these girls were working part-time, and they were now public figures. They had to pay attention to their image, so he followed the procedures. Being called by Shishi, Yang Yi took the time to turn around and asked the little girl with a smile, "What's wrong?" "Papa, look over there. Two older sisters are looking at me." Shishi took her father's hand and shyly twisted her little butt. She raised her little head and giggled. "Looking at you?" Yang Yi was still vigilant. He didn't take it lightly because Shishi said that they were older sisters. He frowned and turned his head to look. There really were two girls. He had seen them before, and they were sitting quietly at the table on the other side. However, now that the two girls saw him looking over, they were embarrassed and quickly turned their heads to go into the theater. Shishi was still worried that her father wouldn't believe her, so she quickly stood on tiptoe, rubbed her father's arm and said, "It's true. They've been watching for a while." Yang Yi actually understood what was going on. The two girls probably recognized them, so they stopped. However, he still appreciated such fans. They just watched from afar and didn't come to disturb them. However, Yang Yi didn't plan to tell Shishi the truth. He smiled and said to the little girl, "They probably think that you're very beautiful, so they're looking at you." When Shishi heard her father's words, her eyes seemed to burst with joy. She was just short of saying happily, "I think so too." Of course, she still felt a little embarrassed. She only pursed her lips and giggled, but then she shook her little head and retorted, "Of course not. Lu Weisha, Qiqi, sister Xiaowei, they're all so beautiful too. They're beautiful in their own way, and you're beautiful in your own way." Yang Yi smiled and said, "Hehe, that's true." The children sat in a row by themselves, while the adults sat behind them. Guozi and Ding Xiang sat in the row above them. Sadly, Yang Huan didn't want to be the third wheel, so she sat across the aisle. She even found an excuse, saying that there were so many empty seats in the cinema, and it would be a waste if she didn't sit there. Sitting there, she could experience the feeling of having a small piece of the cinema to herself. Of course, everyone's attention was still on the movie itself. At the beginning of the movie, the beautiful snowflakes formed, the beautiful falling scenery, and the melodious operatic voice attracted the attention of all the audience present. Not only the children, but also the parents and a small number of students in the audience were attracted by the big screen. Chow Yeli watched the movie in amazement, but she preferred the music in the background. After all, the domestic animation in this world was really good. With the support of the copyright protection policy and Yang Yi's continuous investment, the works made by Mantis Shrimp, a Chinese animation company, were even more amazing than the animations made by Yang Yi in his previous life, who claimed that she used her head to make the CG and her feet to make the game. Is this the legendary first impressing others with a show of strength? Chow Yali watched the movie with great appreciation, especially when she heard the songs sung by the ice gatherers as they worked. She became more and more emotional. "I thought that Murphy's song was the only song in this animated movie, but now it seems that there are many other songs that are very nice to listen to. Did Yang Yi write it himself?" She guessed right. It was indeed written by Yang Yi. Originally, Yang Yi had planned to let the movie's soundtrack experts be in charge of this aspect, but after selecting a few, he found that the works of those experts did not satisfy him. It was far from the original feeling. So, Yang Yi rolled up his sleeves and went to work. It was worth mentioning that these songs were all composed by Yang Yi, although they were influenced by the original version. In order to conform to the Chinese context, Yang Yi almost rewrote the songs himself and added lyrics that could be sung like an opera. 2 years ago, when he listened to the music in Jiangchuan and went back to study it repeatedly, it was effective. Even Chao Yali, a top student in music, could not help but want to give Yang Yi a thumbs up when she heard it. Of course, Chao Yali was probably the only one who put most of her attention on the soundtrack when watching a movie. He Yimin, who was beside her, was watching the movie with great interest. Her eyes fell on Christopher, who looked like a little boy. This little boy is quite cute. Is he the main character? Yimin guessed in her heart. Chapter 1141. In the eyes of the children, Kristoff was not the main character. Even if he was cute, could he be as cute as the little reindeer that loved to eat carrots and interact with him intimately? When the little reindeer appeared, she and her friends couldn't help but cry out in surprise and joy. Fortunately, they didn't start chatting excitedly. Maybe it was because they remembered Yang Yi's questions about the ethics of cinemas, or because they were too busy watching such a lively and interesting animated film to talk. Of course, we didn't know what the other children were thinking. We only knew that she didn't say anything because she firmly remembered that her father had told her not to whisper to each other when watching a movie. Talking would affect other people's enjoyment of the movie. But she really wanted to say something. Tell Lu Weisha. The little girl moved her little butt and turned her head to look at Lu Weisha beside her. She thought to herself, this little reindeer is different from the one I gave you. But I still have this little reindeer. I'll show it to you when we get back. Not only did she want to tell Lu Weisha, but she also wanted to discuss the plot with her friends. Although she hadn't seen it yet, she knew the development of these characters by heart. For example, next, when the cute Anna appeared, she ran to play with Sister Elsa. She was worried and wanted to tell her friends that Sister Anna would be accidentally frozen by Sister Elsa. Next, when Anna and Sister Elsa made a snowman, the snowman had a carrot stuck in it, and it looked like Snowbow. She was a little worried that some of her friends didn't recognize it. In fact, they all cried out in surprise, but they couldn't talk. Fortunately, Cece's discomfort didn't last for too long, because after that, before little Sister Anna was frozen, they started to play ice magic in the castle. The gorgeous ice magic was displayed on the big screen, and Cece was surprised to find that the scene before her eyes was much more exciting than what she had imagined. Especially when thousands of ice crystals burst out like bright stars and sprinkled down slowly. The whole palace was covered in ice and snow. For a moment, the scene on the big screen was beautiful. Wow! The little girl saw Anna holding Snowbow and sliding on the ice with the help of Elsa's ice magic. She couldn't help but cry out in surprise, as if the scene she had dreamed of had come true. She was so excited that her eyes were sparkling. The little girl didn't care about the words in her heart. She stared at the movie that was gradually unfolding in front of her like a picture, and was gradually intoxicated by it. So what if she knew the plot? Just the graphics of this animated film alone were enough to amaze anyone. Interestingly, Cece had also forgotten about the plot at this moment, and began to worry about Anna's injury. Every child's heart clenched when they saw that Anna was injured. Yu Xiaowei and Yang Luoqi clasped their hands in front of their chests, while Lu Weisha grabbed onto the armrest of the chair and nervously looked at the big screen. Her eyes filled with worry. However, some children expressed themselves in a different way, such as Lan Xian. She widened her eyes worriedly, but her mouth was still chewing on the popcorn. It seemed that the more nervous she was, the happier she ate. Needless to say, the popcorn that Lan Xian was holding was Tong Tong's. The bucket of kuyatu that she shared with Tong Tong was now in Yang Yi's arms. Of course, Yang Yi wasn't eating it himself. He was holding it for Murphy. Murphy was holding Tong Tong. The little guy loved eating the onion-flavored kuyatu, but Murphy didn't want him to eat too much. She didn't want him to cause a scene in the movie theater. Therefore, she asked Yang Yi to hold it to the side so that Tong Tong wouldn't look at it. If he remembered, she would give him another kuyatu. If he couldn't remember, just like now, Tong Tong's attention was attracted by the exciting movie. Although he may not be able to understand the meaning of the plot, but in this movie, there are endless magical creatures in the front layer, enough to dazzle Xiao Tianyi. Suddenly, many round stones rolled down from the empty deep valley. After a while, they transformed into a group of goblins with rock-colored skin and moss-colored clothes, just like Tong Tong's robot. How could Tong Tong not be surprised by such mysterious creatures? How could he not be fascinated by the big screen? He even forgot to eat his French fries. Luckily, he didn't have to sit with Sister Xian'er. Chao Yaoli and He finally understood why Xiaoya, who was in the dormitory next door, had a strong desire to recommend this animated movie after watching it. It turned out that this animated movie wasn't only for children, but also for big friends like them. Especially for someone like Chao Yaoli, who was very picky about her viewing experience. Even she felt that the plot of this animated movie was very exciting. Although it still couldn't get rid of the plot of the villains having evil intentions, and the beautiful little princess and the grassroots male protagonist successfully turning the tables. This plot had always been popular since ancient times. This kind of plot, with the complicated relationships between the characters, the exquisite character designs, and the wonderful animation, was still able to make people unable to stop watching it. Chao Yaoli was immersed in the movie until the scene of Elsa trekking alone on the snowy mountain peaks appeared. The familiar piano music played, and Chao Yaoli suddenly came back to his senses. His body couldn't help but tremble as he looked at the big screen in surprise. Let It Go. The name of this song flashed through Chao Yaoli's mind. He had heard that Murphy had used this song for a long time, and she had been looking forward to it. But on the screen, when Princess Elsa began to sing, Chao Yaoli couldn't help but tremble again. He turned his head in surprise and looked at Murphy, who was sitting behind and laughing happily with Yang Yi for some reason. It was indeed Murphy singing, but why was it in Chinese? Wasn't Let It Go in English? Yes, Chao Yaoli didn't know. A long time ago, after he and Murphy got together, Yang Yi sang, "I Want to Sing Me to You," to Murphy on her first birthday. At night he was pestered by Murphy to sing, "Let It Go." This song hadn't been released yet, just for today. The movie Frozen all used Chinese music. Of course in the future, it would still have to use English dubbing and English songs when it was released overseas. The most important thing was to listen to the song. Chao Yaoli was caught off guard and couldn't hear the first line clearly. But she didn't have time to be annoyed. She quickly withdrew her gaze and listened attentively. Where there are no footprints, the isolated country is very desolate. I am the queen here. Simply listening to the song wasn't exciting enough. Chao Yaoli looked at the movie scene that matched the lyrics perfectly. Elsa was alone, wearing a purple shawl, humming sadly on the top of a dark and white snowy mountain. Only God knows the injuries I've suffered. Aisha sang as she hugged her own shoulders. The animation was so detailed that even when Elsa blinked her eyes, people could see the sadness, helplessness, and confusion in her heart. This scene was very heart-wrenching. But as the lyrics and melody became more and more passionate, Elsa's emotions and thoughts changed in the picture. Let it be, there's no turning back. The beautiful ice magic seemed to spurt out ice flowers that turned into musical notes. So beautiful. It seemed that after putting down the music, Elsa became happy. This little distance makes everything more exquisite. The fear that once troubled me will be far away from my memories. Elsa took off her shawl and robe and ran happily on the snowy mountain. She continued to sing with a smile. No right or wrong, no bottom line, forward. At this moment, Elsa's feet stepped on the stairs covered with snow and spikes. A magical scene appeared. A smooth ice surface appeared under her feet, and ice magic built a bridge out of thin air. A sparkling and magnificent ice palace appeared on the big screen. The passion of the song seemed to merge with the picture at this moment. At this moment, every viewer's heart was shaken. F***ck. He couldn't help but swear. Chapter 1142. There was no need to elaborate on the plot of the movie. After all, Yang Yi was the one who wrote the script and tried his best to recreate the original story. Even the character designs were drawn by Yang Yi based on his memories from his previous life. Therefore, no matter how good Frozen was in his previous life, the animation in this life would be even better. In the end, the movie came to an end after Elsa defeated the evil Hans. She brought her family, friends, and the people of the kingdom to skate and play together. This wasn't the first time that she, Lu Xiaoyu, and the other children had watched a movie. They knew that when a large number of subtitles and black screens appeared, the movie would end. In addition, the other audience members in the theater had also stood up and stretched, making some noise. Therefore, they reluctantly withdrew their gazes from the big screen. I'm done watching. Nan Zhaoyu sighed regretfully. Young Luoqi, who was sitting beside him, also nodded. She pouted and said, I haven't watched enough yet. Xishi's side was more lively. After Xishi was released and could speak, she beamed with joy and couldn't wait to tell Lu Weisha what she had been holding back. Lu Weisha, do you still remember Kristoff's little deer? Although it became so big and ugly later on, it looked a little like a stupid ox, but it was still very cute when it was young. Xishi and Lu Weisha communicated in Swedish. Lu Xiaoyu couldn't help but lean over and reach out to pull Xishi's hand to attract Xishi's attention. She said a little emotionally, Xishi, what happened to Hans after that? I hate him so much. Yu Xiaowei, who was sandwiched in the middle, heard this and nodded lightly. She agreed and said, I don't like him either. The girls were discussing enthusiastically, but Chen Shiyin was more daring. She turned around and knelt on the thick cushion of the chair. She hugged the back of the chair and looked at Yang Yi eagerly. She asked, Uncle Yang, can I ask you a question? When Yang Yi heard this, he was a little surprised. When did Chen Shiyin become so polite? He didn't know that because he had promised the children a reward, the children didn't dare to be presumptuous. Even Chen Shiyin was like an obedient girl, talking to Uncle Yang obediently because they were blindly worried that if they didn't listen, Uncle Yang would take back the reward and not give it to them anymore. Sure. Yang Yi laughed. That's right, after watching this movie, I can watch it tomorrow? Chen Shiyin looked expectantly at Yang Yi and asked, What do you mean? Yang Yi didn't understand Chen Shiyin's words. Because I watched Duo Duo and Little Fox. I can watch it every night. Chen Shiyin said. In fact, there was no need for Yang Yi to answer. Chen Shiyin's friends were fighting to answer Chen Shiyin's doubts. Although everyone was talking at the same time, Xishi was still the first to answer. Xishi chuckled and said, No, Shiyin, Duo Duo is watching a cartoon. We can watch it on TV. We are watching a movie now. After watching the movie, there will be no more. We can't watch it tomorrow. Yang Yi finally understood. It turned out that Chen Shiyin wanted to ask him which channel the sequel of the movie would be broadcast on. Yang Yi smiled and shook his head. He pointed at the big screen that was ignored by the children and said with a smile, You can't see it on TV, but don't be in a hurry to leave. There's still a little Easter egg at the back. Hearing Yang Yi say that, all the children's eyes lit up, including Xishi. They turned their little heads anxiously and didn't bother to talk. They stared at the big screen that was still showing subtitles. Yang Yi didn't fool the children. After a while, when the subtitles were about to end, Snowbow's head with a carrot stuck out appeared. On the dark big screen, its figure was very obvious. This made the little girls cry out excitedly, Wow, Snowbow! I love Snowbow so much. Although this Easter egg wasn't in the original version, Yang Yi still wrote a small script and got someone to make it. Snowbow began to explore in the dark. It was as if it had passed through a door and arrived at the beach world that it had always dreamed of. Summer. Warm wind. Scorching sun. So beautiful. However, the children all saw it lying comfortably on the beach chair and basking in the sun. In the end, it melted on its own. Snowbow panicked. Its two little branches waved helplessly, but soon its arms melted. Its little branches fell off, and its carrot nose fell off as well. Hee. Although they sympathized with Snowbow, this scene still made the children burst into laughter. Actually, Snowbow had tortured itself quite a lot in the past. Its body had been separated a lot in the past, right? Fortunately, it had a special ability to recover, so the children weren't worried about it. Sure enough, this scene soon condensed into a dream. The real Snowbow was lying on a little bed in the ice palace. Because it was having a nightmare, it closed its eyes and danced around. However, in the end, the Easter egg ended and the movie ended. The audience gradually left the theater. Yang Yi also called the children who couldn't bear to get up to go home. So Snowbow was dreaming. Chen Shiyin exclaimed. Uncle Yang said that they could talk after the movie ended, so she wasn't being naughty. Hee, I knew it already. Lu Xiaoyu followed behind her and smiled proudly. Snowbow won't go to a hot place. It's a snowman. However, at this time, Lan Xian, who had answered the question earlier, was very enthusiastic. She ran over to the trash can by the aisle and stuffed her empty popcorn bucket into the trash can by the aisle. Then she stood at the side and enthusiastically took charge of the garbage disposal task. Here, you guys are here to throw the garbage. You can't throw things on the ground. Lan Xian shouted. His friends were quite cooperative. They all giggled and lined up. They continued to chat while throwing the trash. Yang Yi, on the other hand, held little Tao Wu and watched from the side. After watching the movie, Tong Tong was a little tired. He didn't like to play around, and didn't like to walk by himself. Yang Yi hugged him in his arms and pouted his little mouth. It wasn't clear if he was serious or distracted, but his eyes were fixed on the line of older sisters. Regardless of whether he understood the movie or not, Yang Yi still wanted him to see these outstanding older sisters and be influenced by their good qualities. However, at this time, after Cece threw away her paper bucket, she happily jumped in front of her friends. She looked a little embarrassed, but she still eagerly said, You guys, when you were watching the movie, did you see Sister Aisha? When Sister Aisha was young, she spoke very much like me. This little girl wanted to say that she spoke like herself, but she didn't say it clearly and beat around the bush. She was eagerly waiting for her friend's approval. Did she speak like she? Chen Shiyin blinked in confusion. Her memory was limited, so how could she remember what Elsa's voice sounded like at the beginning? I remember now. On the other hand, Lu Xiaoyu was very supportive. She excitedly raised her hand and said happily, Shishi, you told me that you were Sister Elsa. Under the surprised and envious gazes of her friends, Shishi embarrassedly shook her little butt and giggled. No, I'm not Sister Elsa. I'm just a voice actor. I speak for Sister Elsa when she was young. Wow. Lu Weisha, Yu Xiaowei, and the rest of her friends looked at Shishi with admiration. She seemed really amazing. Chapter 1143. The box office of Frozen on its opening day was actually quite good. After all, Yang Yi himself had a lot of appeal, and many fans were willing to buy tickets to watch his first animated film. In the past, Shishi's bedtime stories had also cultivated a group of loyal fans. Now that Frozen had been made into an animated film, these fans naturally pestered their parents to take them to the cinema to watch Elsa. This also made the opening box office of Frozen ranked at the top of the single-day box office of the currently released films, and even made it into the top 5. For an animated film, this was already a very good result. Some media outlets had analyzed the reason for Frozen's sudden rise in popularity in the early stages. This analysis was correct, but it also made a judgment that after Frozen consumed the purchasing power of the fans, the box office figures would decline. But who would have thought that after 3 or 4 days, Frozen would receive a flood of good reviews? Not only did the children like to watch it, but the parents who accompanied them to the cinema also enjoyed it. This is the best movie to take your child to this summer. The plot is simple but exciting. The cinematography is beautiful but not flashy. All in all, this movie is very good. I really want to have the magical ice magic of Princess Elsa. After taking off the gloves, I can soar in the sky with the ice and snow. This was a movie review by a girl in her 20s. She did not care about showing her young girl's heart that had been aroused. I've watched it for the second time. Although I'm Yang Yi's die-hard fan, I still can't help but recommend this movie to everyone. Perhaps many people don't know this, but this story was once made up by Yang Yi to coax Shishi, who was only 4 years old at the time, to sleep. Now 3 or 4 years later, he can finally let his daughter watch this movie on the big screen. It's still as exciting as ever, and it's still as exciting as ever. Just thinking about it makes me want to cry. With the accumulation of word of mouth and the recommendation of many people by their friends who had watched the movie in their daily lives, Frozen's box office figures increased instead of decreasing. Although the increase in the box office was rather linear, after 3 to 4 days, the daily box office ranking of Frozen jumped from 5th place to 2nd place. Moreover, the media had received news from the theater chains that they had made corresponding adjustments based on the feedback from the market. Frozen's tickets are hard to come by. It could be said that for the first time, they had given an animated film a screen time slot that was only available to commercial action films with a box office hit. He believed that after the adjustments, the box office of Frozen would be even higher and more magical. Who knows, it might be able to compete with normal commercial films. The media was more concerned about the box office data, but few people noticed that in the Sahara online shopping mall, as well as in the major supermarkets, children's stores and bookstores across the country, the licensed products of Frozen were produced by several factories invested by Yang Yi. Even Cece's bedtime stories, which originally included this story, was selling like hotcakes because of the popularity of the movie. The following scene played out in front of ordinary people during the rest of the summer break. Mom. Mother. Look, it's baby Snow. While they were shopping in the supermarket, a little boy suddenly couldn't move. He yelled and dragged his mother's hand, forcing her to leave the shelves of soy sauce, chili sauce, and other condiments. He wanted her to accompany him to see all kinds of best-selling soft toys on the counter in the middle aisle. Perhaps it was because he couldn't stand it anymore, or perhaps it was because he had tears in his eyes, but his mother said helplessly, Okay, 90 yuan for a doll. Oh my God, it's so expensive. Forget it, you can buy one. The little boy wiped away his tears and jumped up in joy. He excitedly dived into the shelves and started picking. But soon he was conflicted again. I like this and I like that. Mom, I want both. No, I want these too. Let's buy one more, okay? Just as the little boy was bargaining with his mother, an older lady next to him blushed and secretly picked up a cute doll of Anna when she was young. She covered her snickering mouth and ran away dejectedly. After Frozen became popular, reporters began to dig up the news from Hans Jensen Entertainment Express. In the news, besides the real relationship between Yang Yi and Lance Hao-kai and the possibility that Yang Yi was a shareholder of Sahara Online Mall, there were also many photos of Yang Yi and Lance Hao-kai in the super-large amusement park in Jinling that was under construction. These photos didn't attract much attention at the time, but now that they were republished and reported, it became the headline news a week after Frozen was released. For this movie, Yang Yi built an amusement park? The fans of Frozen were pleasantly surprised and asked in the comments section of the news, "Where is this place? Can we play now?" It had to be said that looking at the photos, the amusement park had already been built to a large scale with various Frozen-themed rides, as well as the Ice Palace, painted in the color of ice and snow, which was said to be designed to be close to the same scale, were also very shocking. Fans who really liked the story and the characters in the movie couldn't sit still when they saw the huge ice palace. Since this news caught the attention of the public and the officials had so many questions, the reporters took action one after another. They even went to the premiere of The Shawshank Redemption to stop Yang Yi. This movie was released a week after Frozen, but it also attracted a lot of attention before it was released. Whether the movie was good or not was another matter. The director and cast of this movie could be said to be luxurious. International director Wu Yian was the director, with Jia Yuchen and Li Baogua as the lead actors. There was also a large supporting cast of veteran actors. Even Chen Fengchen played a supporting role. Guo and other young actors were also playing cameos. Just based on this cast, The Shawshank Redemption was already hyped up even before it was released. Many movies that were released during the summer break at the same time sounded the alarm. There were even many media outlets who said that Frozen had successfully made a comeback to the top after a week. Perhaps only Yang Yi's other movie, The Shawshank Redemption, could beat it. Regardless of the movie's later results, many media outlets were now very interested in Yang Yi's amusement park. Even though he didn't respond to questions about Frozen at the premiere, after the premiere, Yang Yi still accepted interviews with a few reporters who were on good terms with him under the arrangement of his company. That's right, Big Brother Lon and I invested in building this amusement park together. Yang Yi said with a smile. Everyone can guess the reason. It's all for the sake of children. Let's put aside the money and whatnot. I promised Shishi before that I would build her the world's largest and most fun amusement park. So as everyone can see, the first phase of the amusement park is already under construction. As for the question the reporters asked on behalf of the netizens about when they could visit the amusement park, Yang Yi also gave a relatively clear answer, which was rare for him. At present, the first phase of the project is basically nearing the end, but because it still needs to go through testing, acceptance, and other complicated post-production works, I don't know these terms very well, but the news I received from Big Brother Lon is that it's definitely not going to happen this year. Sorry, it's really not going to make it in time for the movie. Yang Yi smiled at the reporters, waved his hand and said, but we can look forward to next spring and summer. Under the premise of ensuring quality, we will let everyone see the first phase of the entire large-scale amusement park as soon as possible, which is the theme park of Frozen. At that time, we also welcome fans who like to come and play. Chapter 1144. The box office of The Shawshank Redemption was doing well at the beginning. After all, it had such a big cast of stars and an overwhelming amount of publicity. On the second day, the box office of The Shawshank Redemption surpassed Frozen and was ranked first. But no one would have thought that the good times would not last long. Although the Prison Break-themed movie expressed profound content, it was also very serious. Its box office began to decline in just a week. From the perspective of the movie itself, its plot was worthy of careful consideration. On some film review websites, its ratings were also very high. It could be said that the fans who liked it would not be stingy with their high ratings. Even if the fans did not like such a depressing plot, they would not give a low rating. After all, the story and life principles it told were still very shocking. Even on the film magazines, those professional film critics gave it very high marks. They even praised it as a good movie that was hard to come by in 10 years. But even so, it could not change the seriousness of its theme, nor could it change the depressing plot. Don't compare it with Prison Break, which had a gripping plot and high ratings. Both were Prison Break-themed movies, but Prison Break was more like a commercial film, while The Shawshank Redemption was more like a literary film. The progress of the plot was like boiling a frog in warm water. Although it could be thought-provoking, it was not exciting enough. Many young people came to the cinema to watch movies. Didn't they come for the excitement or joy of the plot? Naturally, such a heavy-hearted movie began to become a niche audience. Of course, the box office of The Shawshank Redemption was declining, and it might not even meet the expectations of the investors in the future. It was already much better than Yang Yi's previous life. This was a story for another time, so let's not talk about it here. Let's return to our children. After watching Frozen, which they could not forget, the children were even more interested in visiting the so-called doll production factory that Yang Yi had promised earlier. Shishi received calls from her friends from time to time. Then, she actively ran to her father and asked, "Papa, Sister Xiaowei asked me. She wants to go and see it too." Yang Yi patted Shishi's little head and said with a smile, "Of course, didn't I promise you last time that you could let your friends visit it together?" But Papa, when can we go and see it?" Shishi blinked and asked. Yang Yi originally wanted to give the answer directly, but he rolled his eyes and had a new idea. He smiled and said, "It depends on how you arrange it." "How do I arrange it?" The little girl looked at her father in confusion. "Yes, I'll leave this event to you. How about it?" Yang Yi smiled and said, "You can confirm the time, then call your friends and tell them to gather at our house like last time. Dad will arrange a minibus to take you all to visit the factory." Obviously, Yang Yi wanted to exercise Shishi's organizing ability. In fact, he had asked Shishi to do similar things before, but they were relatively simple. For example, when Shishi was in kindergarten, she wanted to invite Yang Luoqi, Chen Shiyin, and other friends to play at home. Yang Yi asked her to confirm with each child and get the phone numbers of their parents. Now that Shishi was a big girl who was almost 7 years old, it was time for her to try some more complicated challenges. But I don't know how to arrange it. Shishi was very happy at first, but the clever little girl quickly thought of the key point. She intertwined 2 fingers and said to her father. Yang said with a smile, "It doesn't matter if you don't know, Papa will teach you. You can call them one by one and ask when they are free. It's best if they can spare half a day, and then you can count them into a table." Yang really taught Shishi to draw a table, so that it would be more convenient to fill in the statistical results and more intuitive to get the conclusion they wanted. Shishi listened very carefully. Although the little girl was not like before, when she always liked to ask why, she was obviously more focused when learning new things. "Papa, but what if they are not free? What should we do?" Shishi raised her little face and looked at her father worriedly. "Generally speaking, they are free on weekends." Yang gently analyzed for the little girl. Now they are not free because their parents have to go to work, so their parents ask them to read books and do summer homework at home. Shishi blinked her big eyes and smiled sweetly. "Hee, but I have finished my summer homework." In order to show off, the little girl digressed a little. However, Yang still guided Shishi to calculate everyone's schedule first, and then negotiate and adjust according to the situation. Therefore, Shishi excitedly held the home phone and sat on the sofa, ready to call her friends. Yang helped Shishi to take the table she had just drawn and the pen she had just drawn and put it on the coffee table. Then he left like a shopkeeper. Although it was not dinner time yet, Yang still wanted to create a relatively independent environment for Shishi. In order not to give her a chance to rely on him, he went into the kitchen. However, Yang miscalculated. Shishi was not alone. She had a little helper. Tong Tong was in the living room. Now that his sister was here, he came over eagerly. Moreover, the little fellow was quite tactful. His sister sat cross-legged on the sofa, while he grinned and leaned against the thick sofa, standing in front of his sister. "Little brother, who do you think we should call first?" Shishi tilted her head and touched her chin with her fingers. She asked Tong Tong. "Yes, what about Sister Lu Weisha? Or Xian? Sister Xian Air doesn't need to. She is definitely free. Hee, but she hasn't finished her summer homework yet. Also, should we call Sister Fishy first, or should we call?" Shishi rattled off a lot of names. Little Bayan, on the other hand, understood quite a bit and was very happy to participate. He began to wave his right hand with his fingers outstretched in an excited manner, and said in a childish voice, Big sis, big sis." "No, which sister? Why don't we call Sister Fishy first?" Shishi had an idea of her own. She patted her little skirt and said cheerfully. When Tong Tong heard his sister say this, he did not know if his sister's words were the same as his own. Anyway, he thought that his sister had gotten the idea from him. He squinted his eyes and smiled happily. He patted the sofa and said, Hee okay. Shishi had already memorized the phone number of her deskmate's house. Under Tong Tong's gaze, she began to dial the number. The call was quickly connected, and Cece called out cheerfully, "Little Yuer, let me tell you." But just as quickly, Shishi's expression became a little embarrassed. Her voice became a lot quieter. She said embarrassedly, "Hey, it's not Fishy? Hello, Auntie. I'm Shishi." Lu Xiaoyu's mother answered the phone. After she said a few words to Shishi, she called Lu Xiaoyu over. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.